Chapter 276. Dustless's eyes solidified as he cautiously looked at the figure floating in front of him. He could clearly see 9 mysterious small black spheres floating behind him. His skin turned pale white, and his hair turned silver white. This is the mode of the Jubi's Jinchuriki. It's really oppressive, especially his state is obviously not as complete as Madara's. Even so, it still makes me feel like I can't resist. Staring intently at the Jubi Jinchuriki Obito transformed by Ling, Dustless's heart inevitably fell to the bottom. That fatal oppression made him feel like a bone in his throat, and his breathing was very difficult. Looking around, he saw Obito holding the 6-path staff. 6 black tomo appeared on his chest, and 9 black tomo and the Uzumaki clan emblem on his back. Half of his body was particularly oppressive, like a snake's skin, full of scales. Obito faintly looked at Dustless. His face was expressionless. Pretending to be a ghost. Dustless's cautious look quickly disappeared, and his mouth outlined a cold smile. At the same time, his left and right eyes began to change rapidly, and his pupils, one purple and one blue, were soon exposed. The left eye was the Rinnegan, and the right eye was the Tensegan. Good eye power. Perceiving the change in Dustless's pupils, Obito nodded slightly, recognizing this opponent, but from the beginning to the end, he still maintained the same indifference, and his eyes were as calm as stagnant water. However, no matter how strong the eye power is, the Jubi's Jinchuriki can only suffer. The two sides are not in the same dimension at all. It's a pity that you still have to die. Raising his eyelids and looking at Dustless with pity, Obito said casually. His tone was not as gloomy and complicated as the Uchiha Obito in the outside world. The Obito in front of him was a special existence created by the system to kill Dustless. It's you who deserves to die, fool. Dustless sneered again and again. His body swept with golden light and went straight into the sky, standing at the top of the void. Although the Jubi's abnormal recovery ability made people blush with shame, it was almost impossible to kill it. But Dustless believed that any creature would die if there was not even a residue left. At the moment, he didn't talk nonsense and stared at Obito with murderous intent. A large number of light beams gathered in his palm, and the bright golden light shrouded the whole earth. Looking up at Dustless, Obito frowned, then his eyes fell on the golden light in Dustless's palm, and just smiled. Yasukani no Magatama. A dense number of golden light beams poured down, like a swarm of ants, and it was impossible to know how many there were. The scale is huge, and the power. Obito's expression remained the same as he looked at the golden light ball roaring towards him without fear. At the same time, the 6-path monk's staff in his right hand suddenly pointed towards the sky, and the truth-seeking orb floating behind him swept out. The truth-seeking balls floating above Obito's head suddenly burst and turned into a black circular barrier, burying his whole body under the protection of the truth-seeking balls. Seeing this, Dustless frowned tightly. The Obito in the system was like a bug. He didn't remember that the Obito in the outside world could use the truth-seeking balls so skillfully. Even when Obito didn't completely control the Jubi, the truth-seeking balls he used were incomplete. He directly skipped this important point. The truth-seeking ball is really the most troublesome technique. It is invincible in both offense and defense. It is indeed a technique that only those who have stepped into the realm of gods should use. Looking at the black defensive wall that blocked the dense light beams, Dustless couldn't help but nod in admiration. The truth-seeking ball can create and destroy the world. It is not wrong at all. Soon, Dustless's pupils narrowed, and the light beams emitted from his eyes were unusually dangerous. He stared at the light beams that fell on the defensive wall and were easily bounced off, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a confident smile. Clang, clang, clang. Looking up, he saw that the golden light beams that fell on the truth-seeking ball bounced off like hailstones, and there was no sign of collapse, and the ground around them was like a sieve. What a strange technique. It can be intact after coming in contact with the truth-seeking ball. Inside the truth-seeking ball, Obito frowned, and his face was full of doubts. He could feel that these techniques were different, and the truth-seeking ball couldn't erode them at all. It coincides with my conjecture. The glinting fruit doesn't belong to this world. Although the truth-seeking ball can resist the power of the devil fruit, It can't directly collapse it, so. Dustless's face was full of anger, and his eyes were full of killing intent. When he used the elephant shift technique to seal the Ichibi, Dustless's body couldn't exert the power of the devil fruit, which shows that the power of the devil fruit is fundamentally different. After all, the truth-seeking ball can only nullify ninjutsu, but the glinting fruit doesn't belong to the category of ninjutsu. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, boundless golden light beams roared down, densely packed like a rainstorm, writing its own prelude to destruction. Even if Obito inside the truth-seeking ball was safe and sound, the ground around him was full of holes, and the ground that was intact before had countless holes. This tragic scene lasted for a few minutes before it stopped. Although I don't know what kind of strange ninjutsu this is, it seems to be just SOSO. Perceiving that Dustless's attack stopped, the liquid truth-seeking ball once again returned to its original state, turning into a dark sphere floating behind Obito. Raising his eyes slightly, Obito stared at Dustless in the sky indifferently, and without hesitation, Obito sentenced Dustless to death, and his body also began to float and fly into the sky. The two figures stayed in the sky at the same time, looking at each other indifferently. What a pity, Obito. Looking directly at Obito with a smile, Dustless grinned. That malicious smile made Obito frown, and ripples appeared in his heart, making him feel unusually uncomfortable. I may have to disappoint you, Obito. Since the glinting fruit works on you, if it's combined with the sage technique, you may be in big trouble. Chapter 277. The two figures in the sky observed each other, and their sharp eyes seemed to penetrate each other. I'm going to be unlucky? As if he heard the funniest joke in the world, Obito's mouth raised a contemptuous and sarcastic smile. You should know when to stop. In front of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, any ninjutsu in the world is invalid. Seeing Dustless staring at him with a playful expression, Obito's expression stiffened, and the words on the tip of his tongue disappeared. Only now did he realize that the truth-seeking ball was ineffective against the Golden Flash. This guy's ability is not bad, and he shouldn't be worse than me. Be careful. Converging his contempt, Obito became cautious, and in his heart he labeled Dustless as a dangerous person. Not to mention the strange large-scale attack ninjutsu before, just the 9 Tomo Rinnegan and the blue eyes are enough to attract attention. Huh. Frowning slightly, Obito noticed that the chakra in Dustless's body went berserk, and his pupils widened, revealing a look of horror. Even if the amount of chakra is not as good as the Jubi's in his body, the amount is also unprecedented. How can an ordinary human have so much? Whoosh! While Obito was thinking hard about where Dustless's chakra came from, a sharp sound suddenly came from the front. Looking up, Dustless's figure has disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of him. Lightspeed kick. Good boy, you have guts, and you are courageous enough to send yourself to your death. Staring at Dustless and the Golden Flash flying towards him, Obito sneered again and again, revealing his killing intent. He gently waved his arm forward, and the truth-seeking ball behind him rushed out. Tear him apart. Seeing that Dustless's leg was about to touch the truth-seeking ball, Obito coldly said, any matter that comes in contact with the truth-seeking ball will be completely erased, without exception. However, in the next moment, Obito was stunned, and his breathing and expression were all stagnant. The black light easily passed through the golden light, but what Obito didn't expect was that Dustless's calf didn't collapse and disappear because of the contact. Instead, it seemed to disappear into thin air, completely ignoring its existence. His calf, which could shatter a mountain, swept toward his head. What kind of joke is this? How could such a thing happen? Cursing in his heart, he hurriedly crossed his arms in front of his eyes in shock. At such a short distance, there wasn't enough time for him to activate divine might and defend himself. Puchi, a powerful force that could destroy heaven and earth, rushed towards Obito. Obito suddenly gave a muffled groan, and blood spurted from the corner of his mouth. His whole body was like a cannonball as he was bombarded to the ground. Boom, 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 a huge crater was formed on the ground, and Obito was lying motionless on the ground. This guy is really abnormally strong. I thought his body was more fragile, but who would have thought that it was as hard as a meteorite? Dustless in the sky looked at Obito in the crater and couldn't help but frown. His little foot was still slightly numb. Just now, he didn't feel like he kicked a soft human body. Dustless felt like he kicked a meteorite. Staring at Obito, who was still lying in the crater, half dead, Dustless's face was cold, and his pupils were surging with hostility. His 5 fingers were straight, and all of his fingertips were surrounded by flashing golden light. The Jubi's Jinchuriki was not so fragile. It was even more ridiculous to kick a Jinchuriki to death. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, countless small light bullets shot out from his 5 fingers, desperately roaring down. The target was naturally Obito, who was in the pit. After many years, Dustless no longer learned Kizaru's tricks, and developed many different tricks on his own. The ability of glinting fruit was to turn one's physique into a mysterious thing like light, and it had great potential in the future. Boom boom boom, dense golden light fell from the sky, and mercilessly destroyed Obito, and unscrupulously changed the appearance of the ground. It was like thousands of blades, and the sharpness was enough to turn Obito into a stick. The truth of taking advantage of a person's illness was known to the world, and Dustless knew it even more. This is just the beginning. What can the Jubi's Jinchuriki do? Today, I will take everything from you and use it for myself. The corner of his mouth swept into a cold arc. Dustless's face was covered with frost, and the chakra in his body began to boil, like an erupting volcano. Celestial way. In an instant, Dustless's body was like a black hole in the universe, crazily swallowing and absorbing the natural chakra. The chakra that filled his body, whether it was the power or the content, increased by several levels in a short time. At the highest point of the sky, red roundwood was faintly seen falling from the sky, and the number was hard to predict. Bright God Gate. Prung prung prung. In the deep pit where Obito was lying, most of the red roundwood piled up in an instant, and the large number of the red roundwood filled the big pit, stirring up high dust. The power of the Bright God Gate was beyond doubt. Senju Hashirama had even used this technique to suppress the wild state of the Jubi before becoming a Jinchuriki. Boom boom boom. Ka ka ka. After a moment of calmness, a strong chakra wave suddenly broke out in the deep pit, and the whole earth shook violently like an earthquake. At the same time, the red sacred wood that filled the big pit also turned black, as if its vitality was being sucked dry, and broke into pieces. The deep pit was filled with dust, and dark yellow smoke covered the entire sky. Do you think this trick to trick a child can subdue me? Should I say that you are naive, or should I say that you are too confident in your own strength? A mocking and disdainful voice was thrown out from the dust, and a tyrannical chakra was released. The sand and dust in the sky were suppressed in an instant, and the clear sky was restored. Ignorant fool, how can such a fragile Mokuton? You bastard! Obito was about to ridicule Dustless, but he was distracted by the pupil that came into his eyes, and his face suddenly became gloomy. Sorry to have kept you waiting for a long time. This technique requires a huge amount of natural chakra, and the absorbed natural chakra was used to suppress you. But fortunately, the time to suppress you is enough to refine more natural chakra. Celestial Way, Mokidan, True Thousand Hands on Top. Chapter 278. Wang Wang Wang. The moment the boundless Buddha appeared, the entire earth began to tremble. It was very fragile. It sounded funny, but that was the truth. So big. Eyebrows knitted together, Obito took a deep breath. He couldn't help but be shocked at the huge size of the Buddha. The giant Buddha made up of thousands of Buddha arms could no longer be described with the word shocking. The majestic size was like a moving mountain. First time using this technique. Although it's a bit difficult to control, it's quite simple. Dustless stood on top of the Buddha's head and smiled. Even if it was his first time using the senjutsu of wood release, although he wasn't very familiar with it, it wasn't difficult to control. Spig. But with such a big size, the target is also big. Obito nodded in agreement. The size of this giant Buddha was beyond the scope of human knowledge. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a ninjutsu used by a god, but the target was also very big, and it wasn't good at moving. In fact, the user of this technique, Senju Hashirama, was indeed called a god, the god of ninjas. His face became gloomy, and he emitted a burning, killing intent. A spiral black greatsword shot out from his hand. It was more than 10 meters long, and it looked ordinary, but it had an indescribable sharpness. This strange spiral greatsword seemed to be able to destroy all things. It was the divine sword Heavenly Swamp Spear. The user's strong will would be attached to the sword, creating such a sword of the heart. Controlling the Heavenly Swamp Spear required a strong will. The stronger the person's confidence, the more they could use the sword to the extreme. Stop here. Staring at the giant Buddha that was whizzing towards him, Obito's face was covered in frost. He circulated his aura to the maximum, and the black spiral sword in his hand swept over like a wave, wanting to split the giant Buddha statue into two. 6 Paths Senin's Heavenly Swamp Spear. Not bad, Dustless nodded. This Heavenly Swamp Spear was formed by yin-yang release, so its power was needless to say. The stronger the person's will, the greater the power they could use. Now that Obito vowed to kill Dustless, he naturally used the Heavenly Swamp Spear to the extreme. But you are not the sage of 6 Paths, Obito. You are still far from it. Dustless smiled faintly, looking at the oncoming black greatsword with a mocking expression. Suddenly, the Tensigen in his right eye surged with powerful eye power fluctuations that seemed to be able to distort time and space, and the space around Dustless began to ripple. The emerald green light immediately covered Dustless's entire body, and a few green prayer beads also appeared behind him. The immortal of the 6 Paths might be able to destroy the world with this sword, but you can't. Dustless, who had entered the Tensigen chakra mode, sneered secretly. At the same time, he shook his arms slightly, and several prayer beads behind him flew to Dustless's chest. Staring at the black greatsword flying towards him, the light in Dustless's eyes became even more obvious, and the determination in his eyes became even deeper. In front of him, several green prayer beads suddenly gathered in the palm of Dustless's hand, turning into a weak golden light beam that remained in Dustless's palm, condensing and not dissipating, revealing a sharp aura that could cut through all things. It's time for you to end it, Uchiha Obito. After that, the golden light in Dustless's hand stretched infinitely, boundless, and was completely different from the Heavenly Swamp Spear. Golden Wheel Reincarnation Explosion. The golden light roared out, and the golden light beam swept out directly towards the Heavenly Swamp Spear formed by the yin-yang release. At this moment, time and space were frozen forever. Boom boom boom. The two rays of light, one black and one gold, converged together, and the void suddenly exploded. White boiling waves of air were emitted, and the entire sky was on fire in an instant. The temperature rose to 100 times higher than usual, and it was exceptionally hot. Impossible. It can actually move side by side with the Heavenly Swamp Spear. What the hell is this? His pupils dilated, and Obito stared in horror at the golden light beam that blocked the Heavenly Swamp Spear. He unconsciously took a deep breath, especially the arm that was controlling the Heavenly Swamp Spear. It was extremely difficult for him to control the Heavenly Swamp Spear to approach Dustless. Go die for me. Eyes red, teeth clenched, chakra gushed out of Obito's body, and he tried even harder to control the Heavenly Swamp Spear. He wanted to annihilate the golden light beam, but he couldn't move it at all. The Heavenly Swamp Spear is a sword of will. It seems that your conviction to kill me is not as strong as my Tao. Dustless was expressionless, and his eyes emitted a cold light that could penetrate all things. He said without a ripple, "You can't understand where my Tao lies. Your intent to kill me is very strong, but my Tao heart is stronger." After saying this, Dustless's mind began to empty. He recalled Otsutsuki's gentle smile, and the time they spent together rushed into Dustless's mind, and he was instantly energized. Yuluo was where Dustless's Tao heart was. He raised his eyelids and looked at Obito with pity, and his cold voice resounded through the sky. "A person like you who is trained by the system will never understand what my heart desires. So, it's better for you to die peacefully." After saying this, the chakra on Dustless's body began to go berserk again, and boundless energy broke out of his body and poured into the golden light beam. The originally bright light beam shone even brighter, and the awe-inspiring luster penetrated through everything in the world. Boom, boom, boom. The hundreds of feet-long light beam stretched out again, and directly pierced through the earth, roaring endlessly into the depths of the earth. It can still grow. Is there no limit? Looking back, looking at the penetrated depths of the earth, the corners of Obito's mouth twitched violently, and his expression became gloomier. Looking at the crazy face of Dustless, his heart trembled fiercely, and he was deeply moved. At this moment, Dustless gave him the feeling of a monster who was possessed by a demon. Murderous intent floated all over his body, and the irregular blood vessels of Rinnegan and Tensegan appeared like a spider web, penetrating the entire eyeball, and it was particularly terrifying and gloomy. Even Obito was afraid when he saw this scene. This was not the gap in strength, but the madness of the mentality. Facing this fierce expression of abandoning everything to fight to the death, no one could remain calm. The golden light penetrated the earth without limit, as if to completely penetrate the entire earth. Good opportunity. Suppressing the fear in his heart, Obito's eyes instantly regained clarity. Dustless was controlling the long and narrow golden light beam with one hand, and at this moment his movement was restricted, and it was a good opportunity to attack him. Without thinking, Obito flew directly towards Dustless, and the 9 truth-seeking balls behind him floated above Obito's head, wanting to give a fatal blow. The attack range of the truth-seeking balls is only 70 meters. Close the distance and use the truth-seeking balls to crush me. What a good abacus, but your plan is doomed to fail, Obito. The blood vessels in his eyes quickly converged, and Dustless also returned to normal from the madness. Staring at the rapidly approaching Obito and the 9 truth-seeking balls above his head, Dustless's eyes suddenly narrowed, and the light emitted from his eyes was extremely dangerous, giving people a feeling of uneasiness. The 9 Tomo Rinnegan in his left eye rippled, and the 9 black balls hanging on the black coil trembled slightly. The sight of the Rinnegan also fell on Obito, and the eye power began to go out of control. Mahabharata. Boom! The void trembled fiercely, and it could be clearly seen that the large-scale invisible ripples spread out, annihilating everything that came into contact with it. The invisible airwave was like a moving yin-yang release, and anything that came into contact with it was destroyed. This was one of the powers of Dustless's Rinnegan, which could cast a repulsive force that was far more than the Super Shinra Tensei, and almost anything that came into contact with it would be obliterated by this repulsive force. Obito was also crushed by this airwave, but this kid's body was too strong, and in the face of such a powerful airwave, there was no change in his body. However, he was bounced back in midair, and he was vomiting blood, indicating that he was also seriously injured. What kind of technique is that? Bastard, what kind of freak is this kid? Where did he get so many unstoppable techniques? Obito's face was pale, and his tone was uncertain. He wiped the blood stains from the corner of his mouth, and he didn't even have time to react, and was directly swallowed by the massive airwave. Fortunately, I inherited everything from the Jubi, otherwise, I would have been killed by that technique. Recalling the destructive repulsive force, Obito said with lingering fear. Even so, his bones were all broken and shattered, and his internal organs were all dislocated in an instant. But for Obito, the Jubi's Jinchuriki, these were minor injuries. Do you think it's over? It's still too early. Seeing Obito breathe a sigh of relief, Dustless grinned with a sarcastic smile, and at the same time, the giant beam that was previously hidden in the ground raised its head, and the arm of the beam that was hundreds of feet long suddenly lifted up. Boom, boom, boom. The beam that was hidden in the depths of the ground instantly spewed up, and the slender beam that rose from the ground split the ground and went straight to Obito in midair. In the world of the system, a huge crack that was hundreds of kilometers long appeared on the ground. Don't even think about it. Feeling the beam coming from the ground, Obito forced himself to calm down, and at the same time, he controlled the 9 liquids to form a tough black barrier to resist the destruction of the golden lightsaber. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the 1,000-hand Buddha that had stopped moving moved again, and crushed toward Obito. A pincer attack from two sides was extremely dangerous. Chapter 279. The giant Buddha statue came roaring, and the boundless size, not to mention resistance, even the heart of resistance couldn't rise up. Without fighting spirit, anyone's will collapse. What's the use of this attack against me? Seeing the giant Buddha statue that almost covered the entire sky, Obito smiled casually, looking relaxed, and even a little disdainful. However, Dustless looked at him in a more strange way, with a sharp light in his eyes, as if he saw an injured beast, showing a bloodthirsty smile. Whoosh! A dense number of fists were thrown out, countless. Like raindrops, the huge iron fist could easily break mountains, and the powerful force was enough to sweep everything. The power of this technique is beyond doubt, but for me, who is already a god, it's just a tickle. His eyes were as calm as water, looking at the giant fists coming from the sky. Obito's expression was natural, and he was not afraid. The biggest difference between Jubi's Jinchuriki and ordinary ninjas is the control of truth-seeking ball and yin-yang release, and the huge boundless chakra of Jubi itself. Compared to ordinary ninjas in the secular world, to some extent, Jubi's Jinchuriki is an omnipotent god. Of course, this also varies from person to person. You dare to call yourself a god? Have you reached such a realm? Well, I'll let you indulge in the so-called god fantasy. Raising his eyelids, Dustless sneered at Obito. The disdain in his eyes was clear. The reason why gods are called gods is that they can do things that ordinary humans can't do. If one day humans can do things that gods can do, then gods will lose their aura and become an ordinary member of the 3,000 worlds. Obito in front of him, Dustless and he are barely at the same level, and even without the factor of chakra and Jubi, Dustless can crush dozens of Obito. Looking up, Obito was silent, looking at the thousands of giant fists coming toward him. His arm shook, and a crimson flame barrier separated him from the attack of the Buddha. Uchiha Flame Formation. The crimson flame enchantment was exposed in the air, separating the fists of the great Buddha from Obito. The enchantment was hot enough to crush the void and restrict all things. The highest temperature was like the red lotus karmic fire from hell. It was impossible to get close to it. Bang, bang, bang. Without exception, the dense fists all landed on the flame-enchanted boundary. The flame-enchanted boundary, which was tens of meters tall, trembled incessantly. Soon, many cracks appeared and spread in all directions, almost swallowing the barrier in front of them. Idiot, compared to Senju Hashirama, although I'm a half-baked monk, my cultivation is not deep. However, I have both the Uchiha's blood and Senju cells, so I can use would release more perfectly than anyone else, including Hashirama. Dustless said confidently. With the power of 6 paths, he could use would release perfectly. Even Hashirama could only look at him and sigh. Ka. Sure enough, in less than a few breaths of time, the cracks on the barrier of fire grew bigger and bigger. The long and narrow holes swallowed the entire barrier of fire. Bang! In the end, it couldn't resist the attack. The flame-enchanted boundary turned into snow-like fragments and fell to the ground. Obito, who was behind it, naturally couldn't escape the great Buddha's fists. It's broken. His eyes were empty as he stared at the oncoming giant fists. Obito lost his mind for a moment. In a trance, he instinctively controlled the truth-seeking ball to form a defensive enchantment. Bang, bang, bang. The giant fists all fell on the defensive enchantment. Because of the sage method, the truth-seeking ball couldn't make it collapse. Obito could only hide in the truth-seeking ball and passively defend. Your time of death has come. Staring at Obito in the enchantment, Dustless's murderous aura was overflowing, and the evil golden chakra erupted from his body. The boundless chakra erupted from Dustless's body and expanded without limit, forming a giant with a height of dozens of feet. Looking up, Obito saw this golden giant with 2 heads and 4 arms. There were 2 straight tachi on his waist. He was covered in ancient and simple armor. On his head was a ferocious and extraordinary Tengu armor. He was mighty and unyielding. His scarlet evil eyes were like a devil from hell. As long as he glanced at you, your soul would tremble. It was Dustless's complete form Kinsusanu. Without the Sage Method chakra, I can't cause any harm to him. Yin-Yang release can nullify any ninjutsu in the world. The truth-seeking ball also has the same ability. It can erase any matter that comes in contact with it. The simplest and most practical way to deal with them is the Sage Method. In that case, the Sage Method, all the pores on his body opened, and the majestic natural chakra overflowed from Dustless's body and poured into the huge body of Kinsusan. The golden, irregular, mysterious runes were like fish entering the sea, cheerfully flowing in complete body Susanu's body. In the blink of an eye, they expanded to every corner of complete body Susanu, and complete body Susanu's physique once again enlarged. Ka. Suddenly, the ground under Kinsusanu's feet collapsed. Apparently, it couldn't bear the weight of the giant body, and the ground sank. Because of the injection of the Sage Method, the height of Kinsusanu's complete form was sublimated again, reaching a terrifying height of 500 or 600 feet. Even the white clouds floating in the sky stopped at the waist of Kinsusan. Kinsusanu, no one in the history of Uchiha has surpassed me, and that includes Uchiha Madara. With a proud smile, Dustless looked down at the ant-like Obito below, and with a slight movement of his mind, Kinsusanu's tachi of light came out, and the golden light shrouded the entire sky and covered the entire earth. Chapter 280. Dustless, who was in the immortal spell complete body Susan, looked indifferent. Looking around, the whole system world was in his eyes. There was no creature at the top of the clouds, only Dustless was admiring himself, looking down at the thousands of miles of rivers and mountains below. Suddenly, a feeling of looking down at the mountains and mountains appeared in his heart, as if the existence of Susanu was deterring the limit. The surrounding clouds and mist dispersed one after another, and the dense and endless sky suddenly became very clear, and everything could be seen at a glance. The heavens are so small. Just like what Obito said before, I am now equivalent to a god who can create and destroy the world. Looking down at the battered ground below, Dustless muttered to himself expressionlessly. At the same time, he crossed his arms in front of him and closed his eyes naturally. Kinsusanu began to dance with the tachi of light that had been unsheathed for a long time. The dazzling golden light made people not dare to look directly at it. They could only secretly observe it through the small gaps between the 5 fingers. The pitch-black shadow fell mercilessly, and the tachi that contained the power to destroy everything fell mercilessly. The huge golden slash covered the sky and covered the earth, like the full blow of a god. The void that was still clear just now dimmed, like the sunset at dusk. There was a faint buzzing sound that was filled with endless sadness. As the wielder of the tachi, Dustless's face was filled with loneliness. The aura of isolation spread out, and he looked coldly at the enemy. His emotionless eyes were filled with indifference. The huge golden slash swept towards the enchantment made by the truth-seeking jade. Under this bright luster, the omnipotent truth-seeking jade also showed its weak side, and was directly swallowed by the sharp slash. Boom, boom, boom. The powerful force directly swallowed Obito, and pulled out a long and narrow hole that was nearly 100 kilometers long on the ground. It was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. Facing this thick crack, a sense of helplessness rose in his heart, and his face was filled with despair. Dustless was such a person. When he defeated the enemy, it was not only the physical body that was defeated, but also the heart. As expected of the legendary 10-tailed beast, such a huge chakra, with such a vigorous vitality and recovery ability, under the observation of the Tensigan, Dustless could clearly see that Obito's truth-seeking ball was shattered by brute force, and even his whole body was covered in blood. Some of his heart organs were exposed, but under the terrifying recovery ability of the Jubi, he was able to recover quickly. In less than a blink of an eye, it was as good as new. How terrifying! No one can compare to his endurance. Seeing this, Dustless sighed. The Jubi's recovery ability was something anyone could admire. Dustless even remembered that Rikudo Madara recovered after being pierced through the heart by Hashiman Kai. Looking at Obito indifferently, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. The effect of Obito's fusion with the Jubi is obviously not as good as Uchiha Madara. There is a gap between the two sides. Squinting, staring at Obito's left and right eyes, Dustless shook his head. The value of the Rinnegan can't be fully exerted at all. Only when it falls on a peerless hero like Madara can its value be reflected. In the end, Obito is a spare tire, the one in the system is, and the one in the outside world is also. Don't underestimate me. In the dark, Obito seemed to feel Dustless's ridicule, and he jumped up and flew straight toward the sky, looking down at Dustless with a cold face. It can be clearly seen that at this moment, Obito's face was pale and weak, giving a feeling of a serious illness, and his whole body was full of indescribable fragility. Obviously, although the previous hideous wound has been repaired, the wound in the heart can't be repaired, and the unprecedented physical torture of being cut open is not a joke. That I didn't exert its value at all. It's a pity that it was wasted, but there are still some things on you that I can use, so it's not a waste. Looking at Obito's Manjikyu Sharingan, Dustless said thoughtfully. As long as he can defeat Obito, he can get everything from him, including the Jubi chakra in his body and the Kamui Dojutsu. Injuring me makes you so arrogant that you forget yourself. Staring at Dustless, Obito said with hatred, and the chakra began to surge violently, and the palm of his hand suddenly split open, and a mysterious black iron rod appeared. It seems to be yin-yang release. Frowning, Dustless looked at the black iron rod in Obito's hand. Yin-yang release has no effect on him. Whoosh! Obito didn't intend to use this ordinary black iron rod to attack Dustless. Instead, he threw it to the side like throwing garbage, and casually threw it to the ground. Could it be that jutsu? Interesting. Dustless chuckled with Kansusanu Senjutsu perfect form, and his eyes flashed with understanding. His light eyes fell on Obito, as if silently telling him to come at him if he has any means, which made the latter's heart even more gloomy. Whoosh! 4 similar black iron rods were thrown out, and they were connected to each other in a regular pattern, and it was clearly seen that they were hexagonal. It really is the 6 Crimson Yang formation, but what does he mean by using the 6 Crimson Yang formation? Is he afraid that I will run away? Looking at the 6 black iron rods from the corner of his eyes, Dustless secretly murmured. At the same time, he began to be vigilant. Obito obviously did this because he was afraid that he would run away. In this case, it meant that he must be preparing an unknown big move. 6 Crimson Yang formation. As Obito's voice fell, with the previous black iron rod as the center, a hexagonal dark red enchantment was suddenly formed, isolating the entire world outside, completely sealing it. Only Dustless and Obito were inside the enchantment. Bring it on. Dustless, who was in the 6 Crimson Yang formation, was not afraid of Obito. Instead, he took an inch and wanted a mile, provoking Obito. Chapter 281. Raising his eyes slightly, Wuchen looked around the 6 Crimson Sun formation, with a serious expression. After a while, the smile in his eyes disappeared. He found that it was a little difficult for him to break this ordinary-looking hexagonal column barrier. Thinking back, he began to recall the 6 Crimson Yang formation. It's worthy of being the strongest enchantment that can resist 4 Jidama at the same time. Its toughness can't be underestimated. Is this guy also going to release Jidama? Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of clarity, and his voice was low, slightly depressed. The Jidama released by the Jidama is enough to crush together. Even the Jidama released by the Hachibi and the Kyubi can only look at it and sigh. But this ordinary-looking enchantment in front of him can withstand 4 Jidama of the Jidama. It's self-evident how strong the defense is. But how can physical attacks work on me? Dustless's depressed look swept away, and even the corner of his mouth was lightly humming an unknown tune. Although it sounded nondescript, it's not difficult to see that Dustless's heart was as calm as water. Dustless didn't care about Obito at all. Only people like Madara who opened Rinnegan can attract his attention. Ka. At this moment, the ground suddenly burst open, and a thick tree emerged from the ground. Like a spiritual snake, it surged towards the sky at a rapid speed. 4 giant purplish-red flower buds could be clearly seen. The surroundings were filled with an unknown sticky liquid, and even a fishy stench permeated the air. Fortunately, I've seen Lady Huey's real body before. Otherwise, I'd really associate her with the flower demon. When the foreign smell entered his ears and nose, Wuchen frowned slightly. He casually blew a breeze to blow away the strange smell as he muttered to himself. In all fairness, after seeing the jubi and the sacred tree one after another, no one would imagine that the original state was a graceful woman, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The smell of foreign creatures was even stronger, and it spread throughout the enchantment. Looking around, the 4 flower buds that were originally closed all bloomed. The putrid and nauseating smell came from within the flower bud. It was like a black hole, bottomless. An ancient aura continuously gushed out from within, describing its own extraordinariness. It could devour and erase all matter. Funny, in front of me, you still want to grow without limit? Dustless's face became cold, and he laughed sarcastically. The complete form of Senjutsu Susanoo suddenly crossed its hands, and the wind and clouds in the sky surged. As if it was summoned by the god of light, a large number of light beams rushed over, like a spring in the deep sea, crazily swallowing and plundering the photons, constantly compressing and removing the dregs. This is the price to pay for treating me as air. Ken Susanoo, Yasakani no Magatama. The combination of complete body Susanoo and Yasakani no Magatama has already limited the development of its power to the greatest extent, and now it is fused with Senjutsu, which is a more powerful nature chakra, so its power has naturally increased by several times. The golden light ball that was only the size of a palm also received a qualitative leap and became a lot bigger. Not only did its power increase, but the area it covered was also unprecedentedly vast and infinite, almost filling the entire enchantment. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Poochie poochie. In just a few minutes, the enchantment that was originally dark red was dyed golden, and it was unusually dazzling. The huge golden light ball eroded the big tree unscrupulously, and it was ruthlessly ravaged. Layer by layer, it was constantly stripped and scattered. It was a horrible sight. The same was true for the earth. It was easily penetrated, and the ground was covered with dense holes. A cockroach that can't be killed? It seems that if I don't completely eliminate him, this boring battle will not end. Under the natural destruction of the big tree and the light ball, Dustless originally hoped that this technique could also kill Obito. Obviously, it was a bit whimsical. In the face of the abnormal recovery ability of the ten-tailed Jinchuriki, even if Obito was suffering from physical destruction, it could not cause substantial damage to him. This was because every time Obito was beaten into a bloody mess, his abnormal recovery ability would make him unscathed. Unless I kill him in one hit, otherwise it is impossible to kill him. Moreover, even if my pure physical attack is far stronger than him, the amount of chakra is completely different. If I don't get rid of him quickly, the one who will lose in the end will be me. With a heavy look in his eyes, Dustless's murderous intent exploded. He was not Obito, he had the ten-tailed Jinchuriki in his body, and he could endlessly repair his body. Moreover, chakra was endless. On the other hand, although chakra was also very large, the continuous battle had consumed more than 30% of it. If this continued, the advantage would become a disadvantage. Without thinking, Dustless removed the Kensusanoo that was integrated with the mystical technique. If he wanted to destroy the opponent in the purest way, it would be more straightforward to use the truth-seeking ball. Ka. When Dustless was about to make his move, the big tree that was beaten into pieces again came out from the depths of the ground. This time, it was even more excessive than before. This time, the scale was actually 6 buds. What made Dustless depressed the most was that inside the purple-red buds that were full of mucus, there were small black balls floating. This is equivalent to 6 ten-tailed Jinchuriki Baijidama. This kid is really generous. His pupils slightly shrank, Dustless's calm eyes rippled. Obviously, he was also surprised by Obito's madness. After all, he was surrounded by the powerful 6 Crimson Yang formation, which means that Obito himself will also be swallowed by the 6 Baijidama. The chain reaction caused by the simultaneous explosion of 6 ten-tailed Jinchuriki Baijidama, I am afraid no one will be relieved. But this is also good, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get rid of you. The ripples in the bottom of his eyes quickly disappeared, Dustless regained his calmness. He looked at the Baijidama that was constantly expanding, and the mocking smile on the corner of his mouth became more obvious and profound. Chapter 282. High-density chakra was constantly spitting out from the bud, and the dark Baijidama was constantly enlarging. The roots deep in the ground seemed to be connected to the source of chakra, there was no limit at all. Soon you will be mine. Staring at the huge black Baijidama with envy, Wu Chen didn't hide the covetous look in his eyes. After the boundless and almost infinite chakra is given to him, he won't be invincible, but at least if he encounters Kagaya head-on, even if he doesn't completely defeat her, he will be safe and sound in her hands. The Baijidama on the bud bloomed at the same time, and the energy ball, which was rotating at high speed, shrouded his heart like a nightmare, and the shadow in his heart could not be waved away. The increasing Baijidama almost filled the entire space of the enchantment barrier and crushed everything. Buzz. The space inside the enchantment barrier was softly humming, and the invisible humming sound seemed to be begging for mercy, adding a little dark clouds and the color of doomsday to the void. Abito's face was cold, and his temperament was isolated from the world. His face was full of scales from the beginning to the end, and he maintained an endless killing intent. The existence of Abito in the system only has one essence, which is to kill Dustless. Goodbye. Staring at the huge tree, or simply looking at the Baijidama in the mouth of the bud, Abito was expressionless, and the eyes emitted from his pupils were also abnormally cold, without any luster, as if he was looking at a dead person. Of course, it was not ruled out that Dustless at this moment was a corpse in his eyes. Boom boom boom. The 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached the limit and began to make a boom 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 sound, and the airwaves thrown out, even the slightest one was comparable to a hurricane of more than 10 levels. In short, the space within this 6 Crimson Yang formation was a complete mess, no different from the apocalypse. The scattered waves of air were unable to penetrate the dark red defensive barrier, but they wreaked havoc on the ground like a swamp. The space inside the system was slightly trembling. The ferocious airwaves were like thousands of blades, easily changing the environment inside the enchantment barrier, and everything that came in contact with it collapsed. However, the strange thing was that when these ferocious astral winds passed through Dustless, there was no effect. Dustless was clearly standing motionless in the same place, but he seemed to be like a reflection in the water, unable to cause any physical damage. This guy's ability. Seeing this, Abito frowned deeply. This kind of ability to ignore physical attacks was simply unheard of. It was absolutely impossible to use the word heaven-defying to describe it. Humph, any ninjutsu has an unknown weakness. In the face of 6 Baijidama, let's see what confidence you have to resist. Seeing Wu Chen's indifferent expression, turning a deaf ear to the 6 giant Baijidama, Abito snorted and remained silent. He had a feeling that he was being looked down upon. You actually dare to look down on me, I'll make you suffer. Abito stared at Wu Chen with a murderous look on his face. He secretly said in his heart, strong people have their own pride. Wu Chen remained calm in front of 6 Baijidamas. That was a slap to his face. Suddenly, several dark beads flew out from the top of his head, and Abito controlled them to liquefy them, and with himself as the center, they formed a 360-degree circular defensive enchantment barrier. There was no doubt that these dark beads were naturally the truth-seeking jade, the most perfect technique, and one of the most important signs of stepping into the realm of gods. It could be used to retreat, defend, and attack. It was a perfect existence. Let's see how you resist. Abito's whole body was completely sealed by the truth-seeking jade's defensive enchantment, and his cold voice lingered in the air for a long time, as if it was filled with endless magic and didn't disperse for a long time. Staring at the completely sealed Abito, the cold smile on the corner of Dustless's mouth became even more obvious, and his murderous intent was fully exposed. Although those 6 Baijidama were extremely terrifying, Dustless really didn't care about them. Ordinary attacks like these really couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Do you think you are invincible with the truth-seeking Jade's defensive enchantment? Naive. Seeing Obito shrinking back inside the truth-seeking Jade to avoid the impact of the Baijidama, Dustless's chakra began to go berserk, and his murderous intent was awe-inspiring. As for those monstrous Baijidama, he directly ignored it. Boom boom boom. 6 huge Baijidama obviously reached their limit, and shot out from the disgusting mouth of the flower bud, and directly rushed in all directions. The moment they came into contact with the 6 Crimson Yang array, the Baijidama broke into pieces, and the whole enchantment barrier was set on fire. Although the 6 Crimson Yang array can withstand the attack of 4 Baijidama, but when the number of Baijidama reached 6, it was obviously a bit difficult, and the cracking sound of the barrier could be clearly heard. Everything has a limit, and the 6 Crimson Yang array in front of him is such. Boom boom boom. The solid barrier shattered like a mirror, and the blazing heat wave caused by the Baijidamas of the 6 ten-tailed beasts swallowed the world in an instant. The entire world inside the system turned fiery red. On the other hand, Dustless was standing in the sky as if nothing happened, staring at Obito. His whole body was bathed in a sea of fire, but it couldn't hurt him. With a bloodthirsty smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless's chakra began to become restless. Everyone knew the rule of reciprocity, and Wu Chen was no exception. Dustless in the depths of the sea of fire was expressionless, and under the Tensigan chakra mode, his whole body was floating with the luster of emerald. But before that, I'll temporarily restrict your movements. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless's eyes flashed with horror, and the Rinnegan Sharingan surged with cold, murderous intent. Obito's movement speed is very fast, and if he doesn't restrict his speed while casting a technique, even if he can barely hit him, it will be difficult to achieve a fatal effect. Staring at Obito, who was still under the protection of the truth-seeking Jade, Dustless sneered again and again, his palm facing the sky, and suddenly 15 high-density chakra energy balls flew out of his hand. Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 283. 15 dark beads floated to the sky, and the majestic repulsive force spread out and shrouded the entire earth. Suddenly putting his hands together, Dustless stared at Obito and saw that the latter was still hiding in the enchantment, and the corner of his mouth raised into a mocking smile. Suddenly exerting force, the Chibaku Tensei in the sky was also pulled, and the irresistible gravitational force spread out, and the dark sphere became darker, and the range of the gravitational force covered the ground within hundreds of kilometers. Everything contained the momentum of collapse. The unsightly black sphere shot down with a majestic repulsive force, and the endless space and time instantly changed shape, and in a trance, it seemed to have come to the depths of the universe, and everywhere was full of endless gravitational force, and there was no way to advance or retreat. Even the flames of the previous Baijidama explosion were directly swallowed by the gravitational force, and all of them were attracted to the sky by the Chibaku Tensei. Bastard, this guy is good at calculating. Perceiving the changes in the outside world, Obito's face changed dramatically, and he stared at the 15 black spheres in the sky, and his face turned blue in an instant. In the face of 15 Chibaku Tensei, no one could be relieved. But his eye power is strong, and so is that chakra. The scale of 15 Chibaku Tensei is not a joke. The eye power of Rinnegan must meet the requirements. In addition, the chakra contained in the body is extremely demanding, and in the case of insufficient chakra, it will consume vitality. On the other hand, Dustless was relaxed and calm, and he didn't look like chakra at all. It also showed how strong Dustless's chakra was. In fact, what Obito didn't know was that controlling 15 Chibaku Tensei at once, even Dustless was mentally exhausted. He didn't have a cheat like the Jubi in his body, and he relied entirely on his own chakra to consume Obito. But how can you succeed, especially this technique is full of loopholes? Staring at Dustless with a sneer, Obito's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He also had Rinnegan, so he naturally knew where the weakness of Chibaku Tensei was. As long as the black sphere is destroyed, everything will be back to normal. Obito said calmly. He was not afraid of these black spheres. Do you think I'll give you a chance to attack them? Looking at Obito with a sneer, Dustless's face was full of disapproval. It was true that Obito knew the weakness of Chibaku Tensei, but the premise was that he had the opportunity to destroy them one by one. With Dustless's order, his palms suddenly closed together, and the Rinnegan once again burst out with even more powerful eye power, and the black ball in the sky suddenly emitted a demonic brilliance, becoming even deeper and darker, and the gravitational force it emitted was several times stronger than before. Ka ka ka. The ground that was riddled with holes cracked again, and the earth and mountains quickly collapsed into broken walls. The scale reached the range of 15 Chibaku Tensei, and the gravitational force instantly increased by 100 times, and the affected area was unprecedentedly vast. The whole earth slowly rose, and even the giant mountain that was thousands of meters long was swallowed by the absolute gravitational force of 15 Chibaku Tensei. Obito was the focus of Dustless's attention, and he was directly sucked into the sky. Explode for me. His fingers suddenly flashed a black iron rod, and staring at the several dark spheres, Obito threw the black iron rod in his hand into the sky, and went straight toward the Chibaku Tensei. Boom boom boom. The iron rod inevitably hit the black sphere, and the void suddenly swept a blazing flame, causing a chain reaction, and several Chibaku Tensei not far away were also detonated. Obito easily destroyed 6 Chibaku Tensei. The earth that was pulled by 6 Chibaku Tensei fell back to the ground. At this moment, Obito turned into a savior and helped the devastated earth, and all the floating soil in the air fell to the ground. And Dustless, who was controlling the Chibaku Tensei, undoubtedly became the devil, the mastermind of tearing the earth. Boom boom boom. A few more black iron rods were thrown out, and 6 more Chibaku Tensei exploded, and the black smoke burned to every corner of the sky. In this way, it's easy to control them. Dustless stared at the remaining Chibaku Tensei in the sky and nodded slightly. He was not angry, but smiled. It's good to have a lot of power, but it's not easy to control at the same time, and the power is not concentrated enough. There are only 3 Chibaku Tensei left, and it's much easier to control, and the power can be more condensed. And most importantly, Dustless is not Uchiha Madara, the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, and chakra is almost unlimited, so it also reduces the burden on chakra. Buzz buzz buzz. 13 of the 15 Chibaku Tensei were destroyed, and it's reasonable to say that the range of gravity should be reduced, but the fact is the opposite. The restraint of gravity did not reduce, but expanded a lot. Even the range of the Chibaku Tensei is more vast than the previous 15. Looking up, the remaining 3 Chibaku Tensei are strangely fused together. Is this the ability of his left eye? Chibaku Tensei can be controlled like this. Staring at the 3 fused Chibaku Tensei, in surprise, Obito couldn't help but take a deep breath, and his face was heavy. He didn't expect Dustless to have such a means, and he can control the Chibaku Tensei that has been released. Boom boom boom. The giant mountain that fell to the ground before began to float again, and its speed was much faster, completely ignoring the existence of gravity, and went straight to the dark sphere that became bigger after the fusion. Ka ka ka. The mountain debris that came from all sides in the sky quickly condensed, and soon buried the dark sphere, and it was tightly wrapped by countless stones and disappeared. Don't even think about it. Struggling with his body, and using all his strength to get rid of the discomfort caused by gravity, at the critical moment, a black pearl suddenly floated out from behind Obito, and changed it into a sharp kunai according to his will, and threw it at the small sphere that was about to be buried, hoping to blow it up. A kunai made of truth-seeking jade. Do you really put me in your eyes, Obito? Dustless, who has excellent eyesight, naturally saw the kunai flying out, and at the moment he just sneered, and at the same time, the Rinnegan of his left eye locked on the kunai made of truth-seeking jade. The purple Rinnegan of Rinnegan surged with cold air, and the 9 black tomo hanging on it also swayed, and the focus of the line of sight was the dark kunai. Dustless's eye power suddenly began to riot, and his pupils widened, and he shouted, "Mahabharata!" Boom! In the void, an unparalleled repulsive force suddenly exploded, and the kunai made of truth-seeking jade was directly swallowed, without any resistance. The repulsive force was directly shattered. The invincible truth-seeking jade felt quite fragile at this moment. Dustless smiled slightly when he saw this. His Mahabharata and Madara's Tomb of Samsara, border prison, are indeed very similar, but there are essential differences. As long as someone has the 6 paths senjutsu, they can still perceive the existence of the shadow, but his Mahabharata can't be defended at all, and it can't be sensed at all. In short, both techniques have their own advantages and disadvantages. Just a canary in a cage, you want to escape after entering the cage. Dream on. Staring at Obito, who was still trying to escape under the gravitational restraint of Chibaku Tensei, Dustless sneered again and again, and he even wanted to escape. It's really a fool's dream. Hee. His palms closed again, and Dustless's momentum rose to the limit, and chakra was desperately leaking out, swallowing everything around it. As Dustless's strength increased, the Chibaku Tensei, fused with 3 black spheres, became more ferocious, and directly pulled the struggling Obito over and sealed him inside the Chibaku Tensei forever. In the sky, an unprecedented giant sphere floated, no different from the moon. Phew! Finally done. No, this is not the end. Dustless sat on the ground without caring about his image, and looked up at the giant sphere, gasping for breath. After a moment of rest, Dustless stood up again, and he knew that this was not the end. The practice must be to kill the opponent, and this was just a simple action of sealing Obito, not killing him. Moreover, Dustless didn't think that the ordinary Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito's movements. Although it was a fusion of 3 high-density chakra energy spheres, and it was powerful, but in the end, it was still an ordinary Chibaku Tensei, and its power was far less than the strongest sealing technique, 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei. Ka. Sure enough, some cracks appeared on the giant meteorites suspended in midair. It was not obvious yet, but it quickly spread around, and the cracks spread quickly like ripples in the water. I'll take this opportunity to kill you. Looking up at the cracks on the meteorite, Dustless's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his right arm gently waved forward, and the green prayer beads behind him moved forward, wandering in front of him and circling around Dustless. I can only use the truth-seeking ball to erase you. After that, the hesitation in his eyes disappeared, and his eyes flashed with determination. At the same time, the green prayer beads slowly condensed, and several prayer beads gathered in front of Dustless, and continued to compress and condense, and a moment later, a black sphere was formed, Kinsusan. The evil materialized golden chakra broke out of his body, and layers of golden skeletons piled up, and the vast body crushed the entire sky, and the endless sky was bathed in golden luster. Not enough, condense. Dustless slightly raised his eyes, and after noticing that Kinsusanu's body was very small, in fact, it was already very big, he frowned slightly, and a cold light gathered in his eyes, and soon after, chakra erupted again. A simple golden armor condensed from the bottom of Kinsusanu's feet, and it draped up layer by layer, and continued to extend, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the giant skeletons, and finally the head, and the mask that formed the long nose of the hideous armor. It was Dustless's complete Kinsusanu. This was not the end. Dustless's body quickly overflowed with a huge amount of natural chakra, and mysterious golden charms poured into the complete Kinsusanu's body. His height, which had stopped growing, actually began to grow once again. The earth also began to tremble. Immortal technique, Kinsusanu. Ao. It was as if it had been given life. The 500 to 600 feet tall giant looked up to the sky in anger. The airwaves that came out of its mouth directly crushed the rolling clouds. It expressed the satisfaction in its heart, and the whole earth was buzzing and trembling. Looking closely, one could see that the complete Kinsusanu was different, and at this moment, it was holding a weapon that had never been seen before, and it was obviously of an unknown age, and there were traces of the vicissitudes of time on it. Chapter 284. Looking around, Susanu's head reached the sky and its feet were firmly planted on the ground. It was mighty and unyielding, and its whole body was filled with ancient decaying aura. Its scarlet eyes were glaring at the void in front of it, revealing a blazing fighting spirit. The complete body Susanu, which contained the senjutsu, revealed its sharpness. Its whole body was surrounded by an invincible aura, and its imposing manner was magnificent. It was like an ancient war god that came out of a space-time tunnel, full of ancient charm. The vicissitudes of life on its body was silently telling that even the irresistible power of time couldn't erode it. And the weapon in Susanu's hand was unheard of, never seen before. Dustless had never used it in his previous battles, but looking at its shape, it should be a bow and arrow. Of course, there were also people who recognized it. If Uchiha Sasuke was here, he would exclaim, "Who the hell touched my precious spiritual bow?" When Dustless defeated Uchiha Sasuke, he naturally took everything from him, including his ability, Susanu's weapon, and many other resources. It's time to end it. Looking at the giant meteorite in the sky that had collapsed, Dustless's mouth gently rose, outlining a relaxed smile. This blow will completely kill Obito, this annoying cockroach that can't be killed. Ka ka ka. The dust piled up into grains fell from the sky and fell heavily on the ground, smashing countless deep pits, like the surface of the moon, with uneven surface layers. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the black spiral sword that penetrated the giant meteorite. It was the heavenly swamp spear used by the sage of the six paths in the past. Jubi, the only thing I lack now is you. Wait for me, I will take you away soon. Dustless's eyes turned into a dazzling light. The tone of his voice was full of confidence, as if he could defeat Obito. Looking up, Senjutsu, complete body Susan suddenly raised its thick and powerful arm, and its strong right arm was holding a spiritual bow, aiming at the inside of Chibaku Tensei where Uchiha Obito was. Let me show you one of my strongest moves. After that, Dustless's sneer became deeper and more obvious. At the same time, he gently waved his arm, and a black sphere appeared, quietly floating in front of Dustless, swaying gently. The black sphere was particularly mysterious. The dark halo revealed the most ancient evil, as if it was a super-existence before the world was created, and it was the mastermind behind the destruction of the world. This is the horror of truth-seeking ball. It can easily create and destroy the world, and it is also one of the capital of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Dustless's body didn't have the Jubi, nor the nine-tailed beast chakra. The reason why he could use truth-seeking ball was because of the blessing of Tensigen. Of course, all of this originated from Otsutsuki Haruo, the peerless woman. In his heart he missed Otsutsuki Uluo a little more. Thinking of that graceful and smiling face, as well as the cute little dimples hanging on her pretty face, Wu Chen's heart was particularly satisfied. Even if Uluo often threw tantrums with him, she was content and knew when to advance and retreat. What else can I ask for in life? The corner of his mouth raised a strange smile. Dustless clenched his fists, and at the same time, the truth-seeking ball in front of him shattered, turning into countless black ink floating in the air. Dustless gently waved his hand, and the dense black ink fell on Susanu's bowstring. Annihilation between heaven and earth without a trace is really the most suitable way for you to die, Obito. Staring at the gradually collapsing meteorite and the spiral sword that had already poked its head out, Dustless sneered again and again. The sight in his pupils suddenly solidified, and the momentum of his whole body tightened. Condense for me. As Dustless's voice fell, the dark ink gathered on the black spirit bow suddenly condensed, quickly shrank, and turned into a black arrow of several feet long. Susanu's left arm picked up the arrow condensed from the truth-seeking ball, pulled the bowstring to the maximum extent, and aimed directly at Obito, who was about to break out of the seal. Truth-seeking ball is a black jade that contains all the properties of the 5 elements of yin and yang. It transcends the Kekkei Genkai limit and Kekkei Genkai, and any matter that comes in contact with it will completely collapse. Therefore, Obito will undoubtedly die if he is shot by the arrow. Kakaka. The giant meteorite continued to peel off, and the huge meteorite fragments continued to fall to the ground, smashing countless deep pits. and the spiral black sword became more and more obvious. Dustless, who had excellent vision, even saw Obito intact. As expected of the Jubi's Jinchuriki, he's really strong. Although Dustless didn't think that Chibaku Tensei could seal Obito, he didn't expect him to break out of the seal so easily, and it didn't cause any damage to him at all. But his voice quickly became cold, and Dustless's face overflowed with hostility, and his murderous aura began to go out of control. At the same time, Kinsusan tightened the bowstring again, and the sharp black arrow was aimed directly at Obito's abdomen. "I'll kill you now." With a grim smile, Kinsusanu's arm that was pulling the bowstring suddenly loosened, and the powerful force directly bounced the black arrow out of the truth-seeking ball. The target was Obito's heart. For people like Uchiha Obito, Dustless will never be merciful, whether it's the one in the system or the Uchiha Obito in the outside world, as long as there's a chance or when he's no longer useful. He will kill this kind of person who has weak will and is easy to collapse under the influence of mouth release. Simply compared to the enemy, sometimes the teammate who cheats the teammate is often much more threatening than the enemy. Especially Obito's sweetheart Noera Rin, who was killed by Dustless. Once he learns the truth, there's no doubt that this kid will madly retaliate against Dustless at all costs. Chapter 285. Dustless hated people who were not firm in their beliefs and always liked to waver. Obito was such a person, and naturally, he was also the target of his hatred. Therefore, whether it was the Obito in the system or the Obito in the outside world, if one day he really became an enemy, Dustless would definitely not hesitate to kill him with his sword. His strength is really strong, even now I am not his opponent. In the dark space, Obito secretly murmured, and his heart was filled with emotion and fear. He thought that he had obtained the power to fight with the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten by Dustless without any power to fight back. In particular, the powerful move from before was still lingering in his mind, and the shadow left by it could not be waved away in a short time. I can only rely on the endless chakra to fight with him, so that I have the hope of winning. With a flash of light in his eyes, Obito secretly decided. Dustless's pure physical attack was much stronger than his, and even the two were not on the same level. Dustless knew almost all the moves that Obito knew, but Dustless knew the moves that Obito knew, let alone know, he did not even know how to understand them. In fact, when Obito said these words, his heart was also extremely bitter. The dignified Jinchuriki of the Ten-Tailed, and he thought that he was on the same level as the Sage of Six Paths, but he was beaten to the point where he could only passively defend. It was ridiculous to use the strategy of supporting. But the final winner is still me. The complexity in his eyes quickly converged and turned into endless indifference. His Rinnegan flashed with endless cold light, and Obito also put away the spiral sword in his hand. His cold eyes looked around the gradually peeling Chibaku Tensei. Obito's face was cold, his hands spread out, and his Rinnegan surged with endless strong repulsion. Boom boom boom. The invisible repulsive force spread out in all directions, crushing the surrounding rubble into powder. The huge Chibaku Tensei collapsed at an even more terrifying speed. Even Obito inside could vaguely see the clear sky outside. Boom boom boom. When Obito was about to completely crush the Chibaku Tensei, there was a sudden roar in front of him. The strong energy wave made him slightly stunned, and the mound under his feet trembled. Suddenly, an unprecedented sense of crisis welled up in his heart. Without hesitation, Obito controlled the truth-seeking ball and turned it into a circular black barrier in front of him. Pucci. At this moment, a sharp black iron spear suddenly penetrated the solid Chibaku Tensei and appeared like a ghost. The straight tip of the arrow pulsed with a dark light, and anything that came in contact with it would vanish into thin air. Not good. Obito looked at the black iron spear that appeared out of thin air in astonishment. He could feel the horror of the arrow, and the essence of its power coincided with his truth-seeking ball. Immediately, he worked even harder to reinforce the barrier in front of him. Obito wanted to use his Kamui to avoid the dark arrow, but because of the sudden appearance, There was not enough time to use Kamui to dodge his body. So, he just frantically reinforced the barrier in front of him, and that was all he could do. He hoped to resist the powerful attack of the black arrow and ensure his safety. But even if the ideal was beautiful, the reality was cruel. Pucci, the moment the black enchantment came into contact with the arrow, it shattered and was immediately pierced through mercilessly. The tip of the arrow that was shining with black light directly pierced into Obito's chest. The tyrannical force directly nailed him to the rock wall. Dustless's painstaking attack took a long time. The previous Chibaku Tensei was just to pave the way for him. Now, he was caught off guard and attacked suddenly. Naturally, Obito was not aware of it and was directly killed. After all, the difference in strength between the two was obvious. Compared to the poor Obito, Dustless could be said to be a real super nouveau riche, with all kinds of incredible Kekkei Genkai and thousands of abilities. "It's over, Obito." Dustless turned into a photon and appeared next to Obito. His cold voice sounded, and he could clearly see that Obito's body was slowly collapsing. Even the abnormal recovery ability of the Jubi could not repair it completely. This was the horror of the truth-seeking jade. It was simply irresistible. Just like the two opposite attributes of water and fire, once it came into contact with water, the fire attribute would naturally be extinguished. To some extent, the truth-seeking jade was like the ultimate existence that destroyed the world, and ordinary people could not resist it at all. It's finally over. After a while, Obito's body completely dissipated, and his breath disappeared. Dustless was relieved and sat down casually. His back was bent, his eyes were dim, and his face was extremely pale. His whole person seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. Just now, after a series of fierce battles, Dustless consumed a lot of chakra in his body. If he couldn't kill Obito with that blow, then the one who would be killed would be Dustless. There was no other reason. Dustless did not have the existence of a bug like the Jubi. If he did, he would have unlimited chakra and could fight with Obito with all kinds of ninjutsu. The training is over. The figure of Obito that collapsed before gathered again, and Dustless was shocked. After hearing the light voice, his tense nerves relaxed. Looking at the elegant girl in front of him, Dustless breathed a sigh of relief and immediately asked with eagerness and expectation, "Obito has been killed by me, my body?" The words in his mouth stopped abruptly, and Dustless suddenly found that the empty chakra in his body was soaring at a speed that had never been seen before. At the same time, his body was also changing unconsciously. The hardness of his body and spiritual power were more than 100 times stronger, and his abilities in all aspects were much stronger. The dim eyes regained their luster, and Dustless instantly became 100 times more energetic. Chapter 286. Carefully savoring the changes in his body, Dustless choked with emotion. Especially when he sensed the vast and majestic chakra, his face showed a look of astonishment and joy. After taking a deep breath, he tried to keep his heart calm, but the corners of his eyes were still twitching slightly. This proved that Dustless's heart was not calm. It was like a shocking wave in a storm. What a terrifying amount! Is this the ancestor level of chakra? Slightly opening his eyes, Dustless was secretly shocked. The chakra in his body was almost limitless, like an inexhaustible sea. This carefree feeling made Dustless extremely comfortable. As if he was in the depths of the clouds, his whole body was floating. The rock hidden in the bottom of his heart also disappeared, his body was exceptionally refreshed, and the unprecedented pleasure made him unable to stop. But even with such a chakra content and a strong body, Kaguya seems to be no match for her enemy. She had to use infinite Tsukuyami to create her own soldiers. Whitezetsu? What a magical world with all kinds of forms. Suddenly recalling the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of, Dustless's heart inevitably sank. His current strength was still not comparable to Kaguya, and the enemy that Kaguya was once afraid of was 10 times stronger than him. Comparisons are odious, I can't compare. Laughing at himself, Dustless said bitterly. His eyes were filled with loneliness, lying on the ground and looking at the blue sky with lifeless eyes. As the saying goes, there is always a mountain beyond a man. The world in front of him is just an ordinary side of countless universes. In the two-dimensional world where gods fly everywhere, this world is nothing at all. Especially according to the memory that Dustless extracted from Wangliang last time, the enemy that Kaguya was afraid of did not seem to belong to this world, and even Kaguya herself came from another place. In the end, Kaguya herself was also a thief who stole the power of the divine tree. It's rare to see you so sentimental. A black shadow covered the sky, and a cold voice entered his ears. Dustless, who was in a trance, came back to his senses. Staring at the exquisite and perfect face, Dustless's muddled expression became clear. What he saw was Ling, the embodiment of the consciousness of the system. No matter how strong you are, there will always be someone stronger. Humans are always vigilant in times of peace, and I am no exception. Sighing, Dustless shrugged and said helplessly, "You're the system's incarnation. Naturally, you wouldn't understand how I feel. Anyone would feel depressed if there was a guillotine hanging over their head." Whether it was Huey or his so-called enemy, they were both untouchable existences. And, didn't I take everything from Obito, including the Jubi in his body? But I can't summon the strongest-tailed beast, the Jubi. You're cheating your customers and you'll go to jail. Dustless looked at the perfect face snappily. Facing Ling Er's indifferent gaze, he groaned in dissatisfaction. His tone was strange, and he always felt that Ling Er was deliberately tricking him. He only got the Jubi's chakra, strong physique, and vitality. As if amused by Dustless's strange voice, Ling Er's iceberg face bloomed with a rare smile, and the soul-stirring arc made Dustless gulp. "You're really whimsical. You've already got everything from the tailed beast, and you still want the Jubi? If you don't wake up from your dream, I don't mind helping you wake up." Ling Er's beautiful and lively eyes stared at Dustless, blinking, and said with a smile, "That's fine." Dustless's mouth twitched without a trace. He still can't forget the bitter years when he was beaten by Ling. Even if he now has the strength to contend with the gods, Dustless won't be stupid enough to think that he is Ling Er's opponent. The existence of the system is a manifestation of escaping the will of the world. Ling, who is not bound by the law, is naturally unprecedented. She can transform into any character at will, and defeating the opponent can give Dustless the ability to train the character. Thinking about it, one can know how terrible it is. In fact, Dustless also knows that he is greedy. After all, he inherited most of the abilities except that he can't transform into the god tree, Jubi. If he can summon the Jubi, it's unscientific. Ta-ta-ta. In the gloomy underground laboratory, there was a heavy and oppressive sound of footsteps, and in the dark corridor tunnel, it was even colder. Vaguely, it was a handsome black-haired boy, with messy hair and a strong body, with a Kusanagi sword on his waist, and the invisible aura he exuded was even more terrible. It was Uchiha Sasuke. More than half a month has passed since the last incident. Sasuke wanted to kill Orochimaru and leave Otogekure. However, when he woke up from a coma, there was only a large white snake beside him. In fact, Orochimaru's clone had already sneaked into Sasuke's body, but he didn't know it. Sasuke, who realized that the strength gap between him and Dustless was too big, began to look for his companions. After all, Dustless and Itachi's strength were so untouchable, but they both had their own companions. He must do the same, swearing that he can't lose to the two rivals in any way. It was precisely because of Dustless's overwhelming strength that Sasuke uncharacteristically looked for his companions. The unfathomable strength of Dustless and Itachi shrouded him like a nightmare. Every time he slept, he seemed to be ridiculed by Itachi and Dustless. It was impossible for him to fight alone to surpass these two people, so he had to rely on the strength of others. It was also because of the relationship with Dustless that Sasuke attached great importance to the so-called companions. It should be here. The world in front of him suddenly turned into a giant laboratory. Staring at the giant pool in front of him, Sasuke slowly walked over and looked at the stagnant water in the pool expressionlessly. The stagnant water in the pool rippled as if it had sensed that someone was approaching. It's time to show up, Suigetsu. Chapter 287. Now that Orochimaru has disappeared, Sasuke will naturally ruthlessly plunder his legacy, or simply plunder his subordinates. Although he doesn't like Orochimaru, it's undeniable that Orochimaru's subordinates are the elites of the elites. You can come here, indicating that you have defeated Orochimaru. You deserve to be called Sasuke. In the pool, the ripples suddenly became even more rapid. A man with a head full of silver hair walked out of the pool. He had jagged fangs. It's Hozuki Suigetsu. Odogekure is Orochimaru's territory. Since Sasuke can find him unscrupulously, it means that Orochimaru, the biggest obstacle, has been removed. That guy is missing. Whether he's dead or alive has nothing to do with me. Throwing the prepared clothes to Ghost Tsuki, Sasuke's voice was extremely indifferent. Regardless of the former's actions, he simply left. In short, there's no need to care about Orochimaru anymore. Even if he can come back from the dead, I will let him die again. In the dark space full of various containers, only Sasuke's cold voice was left. His current purpose is to gather enough companions, and then start on the Akatsuki. To end the lives of those two bastards. The morning breeze was mighty, the air was fresh, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. Under the waterfall, the golden figure was training hard. Sweat stains had shredded his clothes, and several tanuki beards on both sides of his face were hanging with crystal drops. Damn, it's because I'm too weak. The golden-haired youth fiercely threw out the energy ball in his hand. The waterfall in front of him made a rumbling sound, and the water splashed all over the youth's body like a rainstorm. His deep blue eyes were filled with shock, murderous intent, and self-blame. The cold spring water soaked the blonde boy's body, and it seemed that only this could calm the anger in his heart. Naruto, I can understand your feelings. Yamato, who temporarily led Team 7's Umbu team, rushed over. After carefully observing Uzumaki Naruto, he was relieved. He patted Naruto's shoulder and comforted, Sasuke defeated you because he used Orochimaru's evil jutsu. There's no need to take this kind of thing to heart. Evil can't prevail over good. In the end, you will surpass him. Yamato sighed. His words revealed a sense of helplessness. Whether it was good or bad, it was the motivation for people to become strong. At the same time, it was also where the devil's barrier lay. After the last incident, after Dustless and Zetsu left, Naruto also rushed to the scene in time, but he was still easily defeated by Sasuke. The two seemed to be in different dimensions, and they had no power to fight back. I'm not as good as Sasuke. Naruto took a deep breath and said with a complicated tone. If he was a little stronger, he could capture Sasuke with brute force. Sasuke and Naruto were not only teammates, but also competitors. After working hard for so many years, Naruto was not as good as Sasuke. Naturally, Naruto was unwilling. It's not your fault. Staring at Naruto's unwilling face, Yamato gently shook his head and said earnestly, hoping that Naruto's obsession with Sasuke wouldn't be too deep. After all, Sasuke has a blood feud, and he can't be abandoned. Captain Yamato. After reorganizing his words, Yamato was about to persuade Naruto wholeheartedly when several figures suddenly fell from the sky, wearing black coats and Umbu masks of different shapes. Naturally, Konoha's Umbu could dress like this. The 5th Hokage ordered you to go to his office. There is a task for the 7th team. Several Umbu ninjas' tone was quite respectful. Yamato's status in the Umbu was not low, and he deserved their respect. Hearing this, Yamato's brows deeply frowned. He was quite worried. If it was an ordinary task, he might have already arranged for other ninjas to carry it out. The 7th team, which he was temporarily leading, naturally showed the seriousness of the task. Although Naruto has made some small achievements in his practice, he still has a long way to go. He needs more time to break in. It's too early to put Naruto on the mission in such a hurry. It will be over soon. You can go back first. Although he was dissatisfied, Yamato didn't dare to say it in front of these people. After all, the Hokage's face still needs to be taken care of. He can ask the 5th Hokage face to face. Several Umbu nodded slightly, and immediately their bodies lost their texture and disappeared in an instant. These Umbu ninjas were the elites of Konoha, and their strength was the best of the best. About half a quarter of an hour later, in the Hokage's office. The current Hokage was naturally the fifth Hokage, Tsunade Senju. Although she didn't like being the Hokage, under Naruto's words, she could only bow down and willingly tie herself to Konoha's war chariot. Dustless, is this your choice? Looking at the peaceful village, Tsunade's eyes were full of complicated feelings. Her thoughts turned back, and it seemed that she went back to the days when they formed a team to fight against the Rock Village. The smiling face that always had a smile, once again came into view across time and space. Creak! The office door was gently pushed open, and Tsunade's thoughts were pulled back. She saw Yamato and several members of the 7th team. Hokage-sama. Yamato frowned and whispered. For a moment, he clearly saw the worry in Tsunade's eyes. He didn't have to think about it. Something unexpected must have happened. Kakashi's temporary 10th team encountered the 2 members of the Akatsuki organization. The situation seems to be bad, and we need your support. The enemy should be the one who killed Asuma last time. After seeing the members of the 7th team arrive, Tsunade showed unprecedented decisiveness and ability. Without any nonsense, she went straight to the topic. It turned out that Asuma, the sensei who led the 10th team, was killed by the Akatsuki. The enemy was Haiden and Katsu. Chapter 288. Senju Tsunade was already in her 40s or 50s. Her skin was still very delicate, her face was smooth, and her body sometimes exuded a mature aura, giving people a feeling of a cool breeze. It made people relax involuntarily, and their anxious hearts gradually eased and settled down. As a leader, not only does she need a calm heart and absolute judgment, but she also needs the courage to stabilize the internal situation and be able to turn the muzzle at the critical moment. If even his own people can't calm him down, then this Hokage is undoubtedly a failure. Although Senju Tsunade looked a bit brainless, she was definitely a competent Hokage. She understood what it meant to stabilize the internal situation before resisting the external situation, and knew how to use it reasonably. This time, I will tear them into pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. After hearing the Akatsuki's words, Uzumaki Naruto's eyes immediately turned red, and said with a murderous aura, causing the surrounding air to drop to the freezing point. Due to the appearance of Dustless, Naruto hated this organization very much. It can even be said that he drank their blood and ate their flesh. Naruto, you are a ninja. You can't be controlled by your emotions. As a ninja, you can't perform tasks according to your emotions at any time. Seeing this, Yamato frowned, and his eyes flashed with displeasure. When he was about to reprimand Naruto, he fell silent after seeing the indignation in his eyes. It was difficult for him to speak. It doesn't matter. The task this time is to tear the enemy into pieces. Senju Tsunade showed an unusual indifference, and her expression was unusually ferocious. The Akatsuki was full of all kinds of S-class rebellious ninjas. They were used to doing bad things. It was impossible to make them turn back. There was no need to be kind to this kind of person, just tear him apart like a beast. Hokage, forget it, I don't need to worry about this kind of thing. Yamato intended to persuade Tsunade, but he was repulsed by her ferocious eyes. He could only smile bitterly, and the melancholy in his heart disappeared. Perhaps, as Tsunade said, the enemy this time is the kind of ruthless and bloodthirsty. They only need to pay attention to the most simple and direct violence. Tear the enemy into pieces. Naruto. Haruno Sakura looked at Uzumaki Naruto with a complicated expression. Her gem-like eyes dimmed, and she felt extremely guilty. Compared to Naruto and Sasuke, she has been dragging the team behind. She clenched her fists tightly, and at the same time, she looked firmly at Tsunade. Tsunade was now her master. On the other hand, the pale-skinned Sasai was expressionless and looked very calm. He, Naruto, and Haruno Sakura had already buried the hatchet. But in his heart, he still had doubts about the so-called fetters. It's no wonder that Sasai has such an idea. He joined the Root clan since he was a child. It can be said that he has witnessed the ugliness of human nature. It's too difficult for him to integrate into the relationship between Sasuke and Naruto. Recognition did not mean that they could abandon the gap between them. All of this required time to get used to each other. That's the only way. Yamato shook his head. He was also aware of the contradictions of the new Team 7. Although they had already severed their rivalry with each other, the fundamental problem was still there. Only the heavens knew if they would be able to work together intimately. Inside the brightly lit room, a round table was filled with delicious delicacies. Hot air billowed from the food, and a rich aroma wafted out from the food. Is it my illusion? A frivolous and surprised voice rang out, and a young man in a white robe stepped in. He lifted his nose and sniffed the fragrance in the air without caring about his image. Looking at the dazzling array of dishes on the table, his eyes lit up and his fingers moved. He directly appeared in front of the table in a flash. He didn't even pick up the chopsticks, he just reached out and grabbed them. Pop! A beautiful figure rushed over and mercilessly left a dark red handprint on Dustless's hand. She stared at Dustless and said with disdain, "In the past, the Uchiha were also a top noble clan. As the son of the patriarch, you don't even know etiquette. I'm really worried about your parents." While scolding Dustless, Yuluo was always so elegant. Her white legs were exposed, and she stood there gracefully, showing the temperament that a lady should have. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have that kind of noble temperament. I'm the king of grass in troubled times." Dustless stared at Yuluo and said with dissatisfaction, "And the master of this family should be me." However, when the word parents was mentioned, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of sadness. Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku were saved by him using the outer path, Rinsei Tensei. It has been several years since they last saw each other. I think they are also living in seclusion. Shaking his head, Dustless was too lazy to pay attention to them. As long as their lives are not in danger, everything is fine. Living freely in seclusion is also not a bad thing. "Sit down, we can't leave you out, Red Lotus." Pulling the slender Hinata over, Yuluo greeted Red Lotus, who was quite reserved, and motioned her to come and sit down. After all, this table of delicacies was prepared by her. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he heard this. In a trance, he thought that this was a snake dinner. "Sit down, Red Lotus, we are all family, there is no need to be so concerned." With a gentle smile, Dustless said very casually. Although he verbally said that Red Lotus was his subordinate, in fact, he has already regarded her as a close existence similar to family. Seeing Dustless speak, Red Lotus struggled for a while and sat down obediently. In the spacious room, the cool evening breeze blew, and the four people ate their dinner peacefully. Of course, compared to Dustless who was wolfing down the food, the other three women's behavior was much more elegant. Chapter 289. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Dustless hugged Yuluo and disappeared. Hinata and Red Lotus blushed. They didn't need to be said to know what it meant. Women in this world matured much earlier. Some things were understood at the age of 12 or 13. After eating and drinking, one would think about sex. This didn't need to be explained, even the young Hinata understood what it meant. Red Lotus looked at Dustless thoughtfully. Although Yuluo's face was full of struggle, and she was beating Dustless fiercely, trying to show a reluctant look, her inner joy could still be seen. As for why she could see the joy in her heart, there was no other reason. It was all a woman's natural intuition. He had to say that this little girl was very concerned about her face, especially in front of Hinata and Red Lotus. She deliberately maintained her reserve, which made Dustless couldn't help but have the idea of teasing Yuluo. Yuluo-sama and Dustless-sama are a good match, very. Her bright and resplendent eyes dimmed. Even though Yuluo had never mentioned her origins, it wasn't hard to tell that Yuluo's family background wasn't ordinary from her aura, her self-cultivation, and the pressure that came from being in a high position for a long time. Dustless was the eldest son of the former Uchiha clan's patriarch, and his strength was unprecedented, so the two were naturally well-matched. Red Lotus Nasan is really cunning. Although she was young, Hinata wasn't the kind of girl who knew everything. She had followed Yuluo for many years, and she already knew a lot of ancient secrets. She was no longer the simple and ignorant Hyuga Hinata, and her mind had changed a lot. As for Uzumaki Naruto, when talking about him, Hinata's expression was slightly calm, and even hid a little indifference. Red Lotus glanced at Hinata angrily and didn't say much. She silently watched the two leave, and her shining eyes obviously dimmed, staring at the untouchable moon hanging high in the sky. Red Lotus's eyes dimmed even more. She was alone, and it was particularly bleak. In fact, as Hinata and Red Lotus imagined, Dustless and Yuluo did have a fierce time, and it wasn't until late in the afternoon that the creaking sound stopped. What kind of monster are you? Your physical strength is so strong. Deep in the midnight, Yuluo stared at Dustless and tried to stand up. The tingling pain from her lower body made her pretty face pale. She stared at him angrily, and her cheeks bulged and she rolled her eyes, which was very cute. However, Dustless ignored Yuluo, and his words directly made her vomit blood. We're already an old couple, why are you still pretending to be pure? Anyway, I don't buy it. Wu Chen curled his lips and said with extreme disdain. He had not forgotten Yuluo's appearance earlier. His expression suddenly returned to normal, and he said, "Has there been any movement from Black Zetsu recently? If there's one person that Dustless is most worried about, it's undoubtedly Black Zetsu. This old guy is shrouded in mystery, and he's very mysterious. Although his strength performance is not satisfactory, he doesn't know if he has any powerful life-saving cards." Seeing Dustless talking about business, Yuluo's expression also returned to normal, and she said in a deep voice, "He's been very stable recently, obeying Pain's orders all day long, and he's also very honest. He didn't show his fierce fangs, and he knows his place." Hearing this, Dustless shook his head. This old guy looks harmless on the surface, but in fact, he's insidious and cunning. He always hides his sharp claws. Once the sharp claws are exposed, any creature will completely wither in front of him. Don't underestimate him. After thousands of years of precipitation, he already knows the root of the concept of human nature, so he can let the whole world live in his script, including you and me. Dustless said heavily. Black Zetsu's task of calculating the heaven and earth is absolutely not to be underestimated. The thread of discussion suddenly changed, and he asked Yuluo calmly, "What about Pain's movements?" "Of course, there's also my stupid brother Uchiha Itachi." After the end of the training, Dustless calmly rested for a few days. He must know the root of the Akatsuki organization. After talking for half an hour, Yuluo explained the recent movements of Akatsuki. Itachi's body really can't go on. A light suddenly flashed in his mind. Dustless sighed. He originally thought that with his appearance, Itachi's body wouldn't collapse so quickly, but he didn't expect this kind of thing to happen. It seems that the power of Dustless's butterfly wings is not big enough. Did you change your expression wrongly? It shouldn't be this "I knew it" expression. At the very least, you should pretend to be sad. Yuluo said speechlessly as he looked at Wu Chen, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. His younger brother had a terminal illness. Even if he did not cry out loud, he should at least show some grief instead of having such an expression. Sadness? Hearing this, Dustless rolled his eyes, glanced at Yuluo and sneered. That kid can't wait for me to die, so that he can remove the obstacles for Sasuke. In his eyes, he only has Sasuke, his younger brother, and doesn't take me, his elder brother, to heart. He's just on guard. Dustless shook his head. Itachi treated everyone well, but he didn't like his elder brother, and even secretly guarded against him all day long. It's because you're too dangerous, you can't blame others. Yuluo was very open-minded, and seemed to understand why Itachi was on guard against Dustless. In the face of the sea monsters with fangs lurking in the deep sea, if they weren't careful, they would be the last ones to be swallowed. Am I so terrible? Looking at Yuluo with a wry smile, Dustless was too lazy to explain. He also felt that he wasn't a good person, but so what? Instead of being a hypocrite who suffered a lot, Dustless felt that the identity of a peerless evil was more suitable for him. Good people don't live long, bad people live for thousands of years. This is an unchanging truth. Chapter 290. For example, a peerless evil like Otsutsuki Kagaya, even if she stole the fruit of the god tree and was sealed in the end, she was still the one who had the last laugh. From a mortal to a godlike existence, regardless of success or failure, Kagaya was already a winner in life. Therefore, Dustless also looked at the so-called justice and evil with contempt. In the dense forest, two silhouettes were walking alone. They were wearing wooden bamboo hats, and the white ribbons on the hats were all small bells. When they walked, they would make a pleasant sound. Those two zombie duo are really messing around. They deserve to be killed for violating Pain's order. Dustless and White Zetsu walked side by side, looking at the several figures in front of them, frowning slightly. The cold luster from their pupils seemed to be able to crush the void, giving the outside a terrifying gloominess. Even Dustless, who was standing beside him, felt as if he had fallen into hell at that moment. Damn, it's only been a few days, but this kid's strength seems to have improved again. Bastard, how did he do it? The corner of Heiju's mouth twitched fiercely. He cursed in his heart. Wu Chen's murderous aura left him an eternal and indelible memory. As the saying goes, a cornered dog will jump over the wall. At this moment, Black Zetsu was like an ant on a hot pan. Although his heart was particularly irritable and depressed, he still kept calm for the first time. It's not impossible to become stronger, but at least there is a limit. Becoming stronger without limit is not something normal humans can do. Even Otsutsuki Kagaya has her own limit. The casual look just now, and the uncontrollable murderous aura that leaked out made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and he couldn't help but shiver. I haven't seen you for a while, and Dustless, Sama seems to be a lot stronger. In this case, our plan is more secure. Compared to Black Zetsu, who was good at playing tricks, White Zetsu was much simpler. He just hoped that the Eye of the Moon plan could be completed quickly, and then resurrected Uchiha Madara to release the dream jutsu to the world, Infinite Tsukuyomi. I don't want to wait any longer. Let's start the plan as soon as we're done. Dustless said thoughtfully as he stared at the few figures in front of him. He had also completely thrown away the restraints in his heart. Instead of waiting for death, he might as well take the initiative to attack and seize the initiative in this battle. Looking up, the people in front of him were Haiden and Kazu, as well as Konoha's Team 7 and Team 7. Especially Terumi Mei, who was his ally. As for the final Infinite Tsukuyomi, Genjutsu, it was not something Dustless could deal with. The so-called covenant didn't exist at all. In the end, the nature of this world was survival of the fittest. Since Mei couldn't survive, she couldn't save the Mist Village. Should I get rid of all these small fries? Forget it, it's useless for small fries to live anyway. I'll just let them live on and enjoy the rest of their lives. Raising his eyelids and looking at Konoha's ninja with pity, Wu Chen sneered expressionlessly. His pupils were like an ancient well, without the emotions that a human should have. He was like a sculpture, and his body was isolated from the world. People were selfish, and Dustless was no exception. He only hoped that the people he cared about could live well. As for the life and death of others, it had nothing to do with him. I can't go on like this, I must find a way to contain this kid. The murderous light in his eyes disappeared in a flash, and Black Zetsu's mind was spinning rapidly. If he let Dustless continue to strengthen without limit, in the end he wouldn't be able to defeat Dustless. Boom, violent chakra waves suddenly exploded, and strong air waves blew all the leaves in the forest. Looking up, it was the two sides that had already started fighting. At present, Konoha's ninjas were temporarily at a disadvantage. After all, Haiden and Kazu were both powerful ninjas, and they were able to join the Akatsuki. It doesn't seem good. We are here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kazu, not Konoha's ninjas. White Zetsu abandoned his position and began to worry about Konoha's ninjas. Black Zetsu was speechless. Shaking his head, Black Zetsu was too lazy to talk nonsense. They were indeed here to collect the corpses of Haiden and Kazu. This is very simple. If Konoha's ninjas can't do it, Just like how we killed Sasori, we will personally end their lives. A strange smile swept the corner of his mouth, and the cold light in his eyes suddenly condensed, shooting out cold light. Dustless's killing intent was awe-inspiring. As for Haydn and Kazu, they were originally used to capture the bijou. Now that they have all gathered, only Nibi and Kyubi are left. These S-class ninjas are insignificant. Dustless, Sama is still as cold as ever, but this is a suitable way for them to die. White Zetsu said with a mocking smile. Looking at the zombie duo, Kazu and Fei Duan, he was looking forward to seeing if these two undead guys could remain calm in front of Dustless's words. But Dustless, Sama doesn't seem to have a chance to make a move. Konoha's support may have already arrived. After a long silence, White Zetsu suddenly said with a tone of pity, because within his perception range, Konoha's ninjas have already arrived, and the number was not small. Dustless maintained a calm expression, and his expression didn't change. Obviously, he had already expected that Konoha's ninjas would come to support. After all, Haydn and Kazu were S-class ninjas, and Konoha's side was just Team 10 led by Kakashi and Asuma. Only by sending new ninjas to support can they maintain the victory. Chapter 291. The oppressive atmosphere quietly spread, and the two opposing forces were obviously in a life-and-death struggle. Even top-level powerhouses like Haydn and Kazu couldn't help but tense up in the face of Konoha's ninja. There is a saying that the king of hell is easy to deal with, but the little devil is difficult to deal with. What he said was not unreasonable. Team 10 was originally an intelligent ninja, and their own Haydn's brain was not very good, and his character was reckless, and he died as soon as he came on the field. However, Haydn had an immortal body, and this kind of ordinary physical attack was ineffective against him. Even if the previous attack had cut off his head, with the help of Kazu he still miraculously succeeded in resurrecting. After resurrecting with full blood, Haydn's expression was extremely arrogant, and his smug smile was particularly annoying. This kid is still surprisingly annoying. Wu Chen's indifferent expression stiffened. Seeing Fei Duan being so arrogant, Wu Chen's face twitched without a trace. Fei Duan in front of him was so annoying that he couldn't help but want to beat him up. Not to mention that he killed someone else's teacher, he even showed off in front of his apprentices, which was really hateful. His ability is really weird, incredible. I can't help but want to dissect him. White Zetsu looked at Haydn with a strange light in his eyes. He was a professional zombie, and he had seen all kinds of corpses, but he had never seen an immortal like Haydn. His ability is good, but unfortunately, his death is also the most tragic. Recalling the tragic end of Haydn's dismembered body and buried alive, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. The most heaven-defying ability was also the most tragic end. Because Haydn was cursed, his body wouldn't die, so he was still alive even after being buried alive. He could only die slowly in the cave because of the stench of his body. It was self-evident how miserable his end was. Boom, boom, boom. A strong wave of air spread out, and a huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground that was still intact before. Haydn, a powerful humanoid beast, was not comparable to the kid of Team 10. Shadowbind Jutsu. Seizing the opportunity, Shikamaru Nara immediately used the Nara clan's secret technique to restrain Haydn. Due to the secrecy, of course, Haydn's own carelessness could not be ruled out. Soon, he was bound by the elongated black shadow on the ground, and his body could not move according to his will. Kakuzu frowned when he saw this. He looked at the shadow on the ground that was connected to Haydn's body with surprise. His face was full of interest. He could see Haydn's body moving uncontrollably. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru, who was sweating profusely. Kakuzu looked at Shikamaru with great interest. His expression was inevitably filled with greed. This kind of technique that could control others without them knowing was a rare secret technique. Get out of my way, Kakuzu. I can't control my body. Looking in the direction of the sound, he saw Fei Duan waving his long and narrow three-part scythe as he sped over. The cold light flashed as it cut through iron like it was mud, erasing and splitting any matter that came into contact with it. The target of the attack was Kai. You can control Haydn to attack me. It's a good blood stain, but it's useless. Looking at Shikamaru Nara, who was sweating profusely, Kakuzu then turned his head and stared at Haydn without fear. His expression was as usual, filled with eternal indifference. Pay the price for your arrogance. Shikamaru Nara's eyes were filled with killing intent. Deep in the ground, the black shadow was rushing toward Kakuzu's feet. Asuma was Shikamaru's teacher and friend. Now that he could kill the enemy with his own hands, his heart was particularly happy. Ka. When Kakuzu was about to dodge Haydn's attack, the ground under his feet suddenly cracked. The dark shadow was like a spirit snake that wrapped around his feet tightly, making him unable to move. Haydn's scythe was about to split Kakuzu into two. Hey. They can't be so useless. It's too funny to be killed like this. White Zetsu's face was full of disbelief. After seeing that Kakuzu was tightly bound, he exclaimed out loud. Kakuzu and Haydn were just teasing them. If they were killed by a group of hairy brats, the S-class ninjas would be too worthless. Black Zetsu didn't care. The other party was just a group of hairy brats. I may disappoint you, Black Zetsu. They were really killed by this group of brats. Dustless heard this and smiled. He scoffed at Black Zetsu's words. Kakuzu and Haydn were indeed killed by Team 10 and 7, especially Haydn's death was the most tragic. Dustless looked at the zombie duo with pity. The end of these two people was already doomed. Even if Dustless didn't need to do it himself, the end result would be death. In the future, they will become a member of the Edo Tensei army. Let's go, Zetsu. Dustless simply retracted his gaze and directly turned to leave. These two people were doomed to fall here. White Zetsu only needed to leave some clones to collect their corpses. It's a pity that this was a good show. White Zetsu reluctantly retracted his gaze and followed Dustless's footsteps. Of course, he left his clones in advance. After all, he still needs the corpses of these two people for future plans. Hiss. Dustless, who had just turned around and was about to leave, suddenly heard a faint hissing sound. Looking around, he saw a figure in a red robe standing quietly behind him. This person's attire was extremely disgusting. His skin was deathly pale, and he wore transparent glasses. His skin was like the scales of a snake, and the thick white snake behind him crawled out of his body. The hissing sound came from the snake's forked mouth. How could it be him, and he seems to have learned sage techniques? Frowning, Dustless secretly thought. The person who came was Orochimaru's former subordinate, Kabuto. Ah no, maybe now he should change his name, he should be called Kabuto. Chapter 292. At this moment, Kabuto's appearance was extremely disgusting. The crystal scales were clearly visible, his body was white, and he liked to stick out his tongue and lick his lips like Orochimaru. The dark red thick robe covered Kabuto's body, blocking the invasion of the sun, and snakes like dark and humid places, and Kabuto doesn't like to live in the sun. There is a road to heaven, but you don't walk, there is no door to hell, you have a lot of courage, the subordinates of a traitor, and you dare to come to the door, you have a lot of courage. After seeing the figure hidden under the robe, Black Zetsu's face changed dramatically, and after staring at Kabuto for a long time, he said with a strange smile, "Poor Orochimaru calculated for a lifetime, and in the end, it was easy for you. It's really ironic." The success and failure of Orochimaru came from the hands of Kabuto. I'm afraid that Orochimaru didn't expect that everything he did in his life was for others. This old guy is really good at acting. It's a pity that the Best Actor award is not given to him. Wu Chen secretly glanced at Heiju and secretly smacked his tongue. Black Zetsu was a natural performer, deceiving people all over the world. Whether it was acting or the essence of the performance, he played the skills of an actor incisively and vividly. Perhaps in front of Dustless and Madara, Black Zetsu regarded himself as an insignificant person, and the identity of Kagaya's third son was probably long gone. Acting could only be considered to have reached the pinnacle of perfection when one acted until they believed it to be true. I don't like to beat around the bush, say what you want, Kabuto. His eyes fell on Kabuto's body, Dustless asked. His momentum was restrained, blending with nature, and his voice was slightly vicissitudes of life. So strong. Big snake pocket under the thick robe frowned slightly, and the corner of his eyes flashed with a strange color. The snake eyes narrowed, carefully sizing up Dustless. After a while, they suddenly emitted a cold light. My answer is, of course, to take your life. The squinted pupils suddenly opened, shooting a cold, killing intent, and then Kabuto's body lost its texture, leaving a faint afterimage in the place where he originally stood. As for the main body, with just this level of skill, he was already close to Dustless. How fast? How can a mere peddler have such amazing strength? Not only was White Zetsu shocked, but even the usually silent Black Zetsu had a look of disbelief. His eyes widened, and he looked at Do in surprise. When he looked up, his vicious gaze was even more vicious than Orochimaru's in the past. Oh, hiss hiss. The ferocious white snake went straight for Dustless's face. It opened its bloody mouth and exposed its sharp fangs. Under the sunlight, the fangs gleamed coldly. They could easily bite through steel. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. I didn't expect that not only did you seize everything from Orochimaru, you even learned the immortal techniques that he couldn't learn. You actually had the means to persuade that old snake. It seems that you're not bad, kid. Poochie! A sharp golden light shot out from his finger and directly smashed the snake's head into a bloody mess. At the same time, Dustless's eyes emitted a cold light, and his killing intent began to soar. Chakra went berserk, overflowing with a huge breath of life. Really a troublesome monster. Looking at the broken snake head, Kabuto snorted, and his body quickly retreated. His hands formed a seal, and the majestic chakra in his body began to surge. When he was about to use a technique to capture Dustless, thick branches and vines suddenly drilled out from under his feet and tightly bound him like a python. Psst. Mokun, no, this is Mokuton. His doubtful expression turned into determination and certainty, and Kabuto's face lit up. In the past, Orochimaru used Hashirama's cells to do experiments, and he also had some understanding of Mokuton. Worthy of being the monster that Orochimaru-sama can only sigh in his heart, you even have such a powerful Kekkai Genkai like Mokuton. Noticing the green vines binding his body, Kabuto wasn't stingy with his praise. Mokuton and Dustless working together was definitely the perfect combination. Sure enough, he awakened Mokuton. White and Black Zetsu were unusually calm. Dustless used to cooperate with Uchiha Madara, and a large number of Hashirama's cells were integrated into his body, so it was normal that he could use Mokuton. You want to absorb my chakra? How can I let you do as you wish? Slightly frowning, Kabuto was surprised that the green vines binding his body were swallowing chakra, and he sneered again and again, looking at Dustless, his eyes filled with pride and contempt, and his body strangely melted. Like melting ice, his 1-meter-tall body turned into a puddle of water in the blink of an eye. Orochimaru-sama collected the Kekkai Genkai of various clans, and there is a lot of content. In fact, many years ago, Orochimaru began to plan to have the same ability as you, Uchiha Dustless. The puddle of water on the ground rippled and quickly shrank, turning into a figure with dense scales all over his body. There was no doubt that it was Kabuto. Now, my body is an existence beyond human knowledge, you can't hurt me, and you can't kill me. Kabuto looked at the indifferent Dustless, raised his arms and shouted loudly. His tone was unprecedentedly arrogant. Only Dustless had the ability to be immune to all physical attacks, and from now on, Kabuto would be the second person to have it. This was the power of science. There is no trick in the world that can be absolutely immune to physical attacks, including my ability. Dustless just faintly shook his head. Even if he didn't need Haki, as long as the mysterious power of gravity appeared, the invincibility of the fruit would be broken. A mere Hozuki clan's water transformation jutsu dares to say that you are immune to all attacks. Should I say that you are ignorant or naive? I'm afraid that even Orochimaru wouldn't dare to boast as shamelessly as you. It seems that after successfully practicing Sage Mode, you have forgotten how much you are worth, Kabuto. Chapter 293. Kabuto just frowned at Dustless's words. Not only did he have the water transformation jutsu that could easily ignore physical attacks, but he also investigated Uzumaki Karen's body and implanted the cells of the Uzumaki's body into his body. As long as he was injured, he would be able to recover. With the strongest ninjutsu that could ignore physical attacks, and a body that could recover when injured, Kabuto didn't think that he was worse than Dustless. You have a sharp tongue. It's useless to show off. I will capture you and turn you into the most perfect material. Kabuto stared at Dustless ferociously. Including Zetsu, they were all perfect experimental materials. None of them could escape. His snake eyes narrowed slightly, and Kabuto's line of sight locked onto Dustless. His calm and natural appearance made Kabuto particularly angry. He had a feeling of being treated as a small character not worth mentioning. In a battle between powerhouses, one should be completely focused, and not so calm and composed, as if Kabuto Orochi was already in his grasp. First of all, Kabuto's temperament was completely defeated. Since your physique is immune to physical attacks, then how about this? Seeing Kabuto not moving for a long time, Dustless obviously lost his patience and changed from defense to offense. Chakra surged in his body, and in less than a second, a blazing fire wave came out of his mouth. Fire release, great fire annihilation. The flames reached a diameter of tens of meters, and the temperature increased by hundreds of times. The blazing high temperature evaporated all the flowers and trees, turning them into ashes. Under such high temperature, even water could only evaporate into nothingness. How can this guy's attainments in fire release be so high? His face was filled with shock. His eyes were wide open, and his mind was in chaos. Facing such a terrifying sea of fire, his entire soul was trembling. His hair stood on end as he looked at the boundless sea of fire in disgust. At the same time, he was desperately erupting chakra in his body. The so-called jutsu that could ignore physical attacks was forgotten. What a joke! Such a terrifying flame would only evaporate faster if it turned into water. What a powerful nature chakra, but this guy's speed of entering sage mode is really fast. Dustless's eyes narrowed as he felt the natural power rushing through the air. Ninjas like Jiraiya and Namikaze Minato needed a certain amount of time to enter sage mode, but Kabuto only took a very short time. Senjutsu, no chance reincarnation. The lifeless charred ground suddenly surged, as if it had been given life in an instant. It began to rise rapidly, turning into an abnormally strong wall, tightly protecting the snake within. It was like an iron bucket that was watertight. The flames outside was suddenly blocked and couldn't move forward, and could only burn in front of the large wall, and burned it black. After a long while, the grand flame gradually extinguished. Kabuto Cave Senjutsu is really good. Dustless nodded secretly, and his pupils splashed with faint ripples. Looking directly at the defensive wall formed in the blink of an eye, he couldn't help but think highly of Kabuto Cave's senjutsu. It was obvious that the group of unassuming snakes were quite capable. Dustless understood the effect of this jutsu in his previous life. It can give life to inanimate objects, and it is a reincarnation ninjutsu that can be controlled. It is not a simple ninjutsu that uses chakra to control objects, and under the effect of this jutsu, the inanimate objects move quickly. But that's it. Raising his eyelids, the corner of his mouth raised a contemptuous arc. Dustless looked calm, and he didn't put the iron wall in his eyes at all, and he threw out countless dense golden light. Yasukani no Magatama. The golden energy tide surged forward and the sturdy city walls were immediately eroded by the golden light. Dust flew up and the previously intact walls were now filled with holes. The holes were like the stars in the sky. It was impossible to count how many holes there were. Boom, boom, boom. The wall finally fell to the ground. Dustless's cruel attack just now gave it a fatal injury, and it no longer had the ability to defend. Just one move is enough to deal with it. What a monster, but it seems I didn't choose the wrong partner. Seeing the defensive wall that was controlled by senjutsu being destroyed in a snap of a finger, Kabuto's eyes not only didn't have any fear, but instead flashed with a dense light, and he stared at Dustless with fanatical eyes, especially his fearless and ant-like eyes, which made Kabuto even more determined. Staring at Dustless with malicious intent, the majestic chakra continued to pour out, and Kabuto showed no signs of stopping. Rumble, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, the ground under Dustless's feet suddenly surged, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, madly and rapidly rotating, forming a huge black hole that swallowed Dustless. And on the other side of the black hole was the door to the underworld. Giving life to something that doesn't have life. Looks like it's the same senjutsu as before. Dustless jumped up and stared at the earth whirlpool below, and couldn't help but frown. The huge whirlpool swallowed everything around it, as if it was an ancient demon god that had been given life, and if it couldn't taint it, then it couldn't reincarnate. This person is very ambitious. Getting rid of him now might not be a bad thing. His eyes flashed with anger. Dustless decided to get rid of Kabuto, this eyesore. It was not a good thing to let such an ambitious person live. Especially Kabuto's ambition was not inferior to Obito and Madara. He wanted to become a legendary dragon. Dragons were actually no different from gods, and belonged to the category of legendary existences. In other words, those who wanted to become dragons actually wanted to become gods. You think you can step on thousands of living beings and show off your prowess? Dream on. He sneered at Kabuto. The murderous aura in Dustless's eyes became deeper and deeper. His scarlet eyes shot out a hellish bloody aura. The evil eternal Mangekyo Sharingan focused on Kabuto's body, and the corners of his mouth rose into an evil smile. Orochimaru's death is very suitable for you. Chapter 294. Gently raising his eyes, looking at Dustless in the sky, Kabuto finally understood Orochimaru's feelings. The most tragic thing in the world is this: a perfect specimen is right in front of you, but you're helpless to find that you don't have the ability to dissect the perfect specimen. It's really a tragedy. It's not too late to try again. In short, I can't let go of such a rare opportunity. After hesitating for a moment, Kabuto was resolute and decisive. The cooked duck was leaving him just like that. How could Kabuto be willing to do that? Chakra gushed out, and just as he was about to fight with Dustless again, his body suddenly burned with black flames. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. It's really strong. The intense burning pain spread all over his body, and Kabuto was slightly stunned, looking at the black flames burning on his back. His face was full of surprise, and the desire in his eyes was undisguised. The power of the Sharingan is known throughout the world, especially Dustless's eyes. It's even more difficult to estimate. This kind of power is something that everyone wants. Orochimaru was like that, and now Kabuto, who inherited everything from him, was no exception. But how can this kind of flame burn me? I'm a snake sage. Glancing at the black flames on his back, Kabuto showed a contemptuous smile, and immediately the skin on his back suddenly dried and cracked, and the black flames slowly fell off. Still molting, the substitution jutsu is very useful. Dustless, who was floating in the sky, slightly frowned. The substitution jutsu is the best ninjutsu to resist the Amaterasu. Orochimaru and Sasuke used this jutsu to resist the erosion of the Amaterasu again and again. I didn't expect this little bug to have some skills. Dustless looked down at Kabuto's ugly face with a smile, and said indifferently. Looking at Kabuto, he showed a teasing smile like a cat playing with a mouse. That kind of look is really unpleasant. Raising his eyebrows, Kabuto's pale face suddenly became gloomy. Dustless's smile made his whole body uncomfortable. It was obviously a hunter in high spirits teasing a dying prey. Do you still think I'm the same small character from before? In the past, he was just Orochimaru's subordinate. To put it bluntly, he was just Orochimaru's henchman. However, things were very different now. Kabuto was naturally one of the protagonists of this world. Whether it was his current strength or his trump cards, they were all better than Orochimaru. Dustless was still looking at him like an ant. How could he be angry? His body once again gathered rich of natural chakra. You're asking for it. Seeing Kabuto's nature power gather, Wu Chen sneered even more. Kabuto dared to show off his immortal technique in front of him. He really didn't know where his confidence came from. But you already have no chance, Kabuto. Looking down indifferently at Kabuto, who was eager to give it a try, Dustless put his hands together and the boundless chakra gushed out again. Just as he was about to give him a fatal blow, Kabuto's voice sounded, and his words were shocking. Dustless didn't recover for a long time. Why don't we try to cooperate? Kabuto stared at Dustless, his words shocking everyone. His tone was like an ancient well, calm and composed. His confident appearance made people unable to help but be stunned. Fuku's confident appearance clearly showed that he was in the bag. Hearing this, Dustless just looked indifferently at Kabuto, then closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, "The people who want to cooperate with me are like carp crossing the river. Unfortunately, your name isn't among them, Kabuto." Raising his eyes, Dustless looked at Kabuto indifferently and refused without hesitation. "Kabuto? That's a pretty good name." Kabuto's eyes flashed, and looking at Dustless's eyes, he said bluntly, "Of the people who want to cooperate with you, I'm naturally one of them, and I'm going to be your most important partner." His tone was full of confidence. Kabuto wasn't worried about whether Dustless would agree to the alliance or not. He could see that Dustless was the kind of person with ambition. He absolutely wouldn't refuse to cooperate with him because of personal grudges. Kabuto and Dustless's goal was almost the same. They both wanted to conquer the world. Wishful thinking. Indifferently looking at Kabuto, Dustless sneered in his heart. Precisely because the two of them had the same goal, Dustless couldn't cooperate with this kind of person. Especially in this situation, he could take advantage of this opportunity to kill him. "If you and I cooperate, there are only a few dozen S-class ninjas in Akatsuki. The rest of them have almost no fighting power. I can use my subordinates to make up for your manpower," Kabuto said confidently, as if he was sure that Dustless would agree, but he was doomed to be disappointed. "I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not interested in cooperating with you. Your so-called subordinates should be the legacy of Orochimaru, the strong corpses he plundered. Although it's very tempting, but don't you think that as long as I kill you, I can get everything from you?" Staring indifferently at Kabuto, Dustless asked with a murderous aura. His majestic murderous aura wasn't concealed at all. The terrifying murderous aura directly dyed the entire sky into a gloomy blood-red color, as if a god was enraged. The entire world was pervaded with an unprecedented pressure. Kabuto just smiled. He had an important bargaining chip, and the Kage corpses were just appetizers. What came next was the main course. "I'll give you the heaviest main course," Kabuto smiled strangely, and suddenly made a hand seal. The ground also burst open, and an ancient coffin broke out from the depths of the ground, filling the air with the smell of decay. Chapter 295. The ancient coffin came into view, and it was filled with the smell of time. At first glance, one could tell that it wasn't an ordinary thing, especially the ancient aura on it. Even after the passage of many years, the invincible aura lingering on it could still be felt vaguely. There was no need to think about it to know who was in the coffin. Only Hashirama and Madara had such a level of power. Now that the corpses of Hashirama and other Hokage were in Dustless's hands, it was self-evident who was in the coffin. "Achiyamada. No wonder I couldn't find him for so long. He actually ran into this kid's hands." Dustless's eyes were like torches. He was sure that the person in the coffin was definitely Madara. "Kakaka." As if he was afraid that Dustless didn't know who was in the coffin, Kabuto snorted, and the lid of the coffin suddenly fell off, revealing a very young middle-aged man. The person sleeping in the coffin had black hair, handsome facial features, and was wearing dark red armor. Even if he was just lying quietly, he was showing a domineering aura. There was no doubt that it was Uchiha Madara. Damn Black Zetsu. Seeing this, Dustless cursed in his heart. He knew that Black Zetsu deliberately gave this to Kabuto. Where is Madara's body? Black Zetsu is the only one in the world who knows. This old guy didn't want to help Madara from the beginning, he just wanted to use him. "Is my strength enough to make you trust me so much? You really are the kind of person who understands the importance of caution. Fine, I will fulfill your wish and cooperate with this brat once. Let's see who will have the last laugh. Dustless began to plan to cooperate with Kabuto. This kid controlled a large number of Edo Tensei. If he didn't pull him to his side, there would be a lot of trouble. Even if the Edo Tensei army was useless to Dustless, White Zetsu was the natural enemy of the Edo Tensei. That's the only way. The corner of his eyes swept past Kabuto. Dustless made a decision. Although there was the suspicion of asking a tiger for its skin, with Kabuto's small appetite, it would be 100 years before he could swallow Dustless. There's no problem with working together, but, staring at Kabuto's face, Dustless snorted, too lazy to talk nonsense, and said coldly, I still can't trust you. White Zetsu's clone must stay by your side to monitor you. If you agree, from now on we will be allies. Kabuto frowned. He did have a plan, and it was nothing more than the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Now that Dustless sent White Zetsu's clone to monitor him, it would be very inconvenient to take the Sharingan. No problem. After thinking for a while, Kabuto gritted his teeth and made a decision. White Zetsu's clone was just a rookie among rookies. When he took the Sharingan, he could easily kill him, and then betray the Akatsuki. Moreover, Kabuto didn't intend to take the Sharingan now. Anyway, Uchiha Itachi and Uchiha Sasuke couldn't escape from them. As for Dustless's Manjikyu Sharingan, Kabuto didn't think much about it. People must have self-awareness. He also realized that he and Dustless were aware of it, and even if he wanted to take the Sharingan, it would be in the future, not now. Happy cooperation. Showing a warm smile towards Dustless, Kabuto politely stretched out his right hand. However, unfortunately, Dustless didn't intend to shake hands with him. He directly ignored him, didn't even look at him, treated him like air. Who knows how many dead snakes he touched, how many monster experiments he did. Dustless didn't want to touch him. Damn Black Zetsu, sooner or later I will tear you to pieces. For the time being, I will let you live for 2 more days. The monstrous killing intent in his heart calmed down. Dustless secretly thought, Uchiha Madara's body has been kept by Black Zetsu, but this old guy gave it to Kabuto instead of his ally, Dustless. As for what method, I'm afraid only ghosts know. This old guy wants Kabuto use Madara to suppress me, naive. Immediately understanding Black Zetsu's meaning, Dustless secretly sneered. I'm afraid that the reason why Black Zetsu gave Madara's body to Kabuto was to use it to deter Dustless. But he didn't know that the current Dustless was not afraid of Madara, and Dustless was not the fragile fledgling of the past. Even if he met Madara at his peak, Dustless could fight him. It seems that someone is coming. Do you want to kill them all? The perception in Sage mode was naturally extremely strong, and Kabuto naturally felt that it was Konoha's ninja who came to support Team 10. Immediately, he stretched out his disgusting snake head and licked his lips, which was particularly creepy. Of course, his line of sight faintly locked onto the 10th squad that was fighting in the distance, as well as Fei Duan and Kazu who were fighting with them with all their might. His face was covered with frost that seemed to be isolated from the world, and his voice that was as calm as an ancient well resounded through the sky. Konoha's ninja, including Haiden and Kavu, kill them all. Wu Chen's squinted eyes suddenly enlarged. His voice was full of murderous intent. His cold eyes were no different from a dead man's. There was no emotion that a human should have. Dustless did not have the slightest mercy to Kazu and Haiden, as well as the members of Team 10 and Kakashi. According to his estimation, he didn't have much confidence in Mei. Until today, he still didn't have confidence in Mei, and only by using force to pressure the Cloud Village to tell him where Mei went. Even Haiden and Kazu are killed. What a cold man. Hearing this, Kabuto stared at Dustless in surprise. He didn't expect this guy to be so cold-blooded and even kill his own people. But soon, he laughed strangely and said gloomily, if those 2 guys were killed by the people they usually look down on the most, their faces must be rich. Chapter 296. Zetsu silently followed behind Dustless. It was not good for him to interrupt. White Zetsu did not approve of working together with Kabuto. Just looking at his disgusting appearance was enough to make people want to vomit, not to mention monitoring him closely. Thinking about it, White Zetsu felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't help but shiver. In particular, the current Kabuto was even worse than Orochimaru. He was far more disgusting and crazy than Orochimaru. The scales on Kabuto's skin reminded White Zetsu of some kind of creature. I really don't know what Dustless-sama is thinking, choosing to cooperate with such a barbaric creature. White Zetsu seemed to be thinking of the bitter life in the future, and complained with dissatisfaction. Whether it was Orochimaru or Kabuto, White Zetsu didn't like people who were related to snakes. It doesn't matter if you don't know now. Later, you will know how brilliant Dustless-sama's plan is. Ignoring White Zetsu, Black Zetsu laughed. His voice was particularly hoarse, obviously full of other meanings. Madara's body was naturally given to Kabuto by Black Zetsu. He originally wanted to give it to Kabuto in the future, but Dustless's growth was beyond his imagination, and someone had to stop him. The original candidate was Orochimaru, but now that Orochimaru was dead, only Kabuto, who came later, temporarily replaced him. However, the effect was quite good, and Dustless did indeed agree to cooperate with Kabuto. Dustless-sama's power is unparalleled. Naturally, he can suppress Kabuto. It seemed that after seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya resurrected intact, Black Zetsu laughed mockingly, and there was a hint of ridicule and gloating in his tone. His sight seemed to have crossed the layers of time and space, seeing Dustless, Madara, and Obito's sad expression when they knew the truth. For Black Zetsu, this was definitely the most unforgettable scene, and also the reward for his hard work over the years. Uchiha Dustless, Uchiha Itachi, and Uchiha Sasuke. Not only you three brothers, but the whole world will be my test ground in the future. His eyes flashed with a scorching light, and Kabuto said in his heart. Kabuto inherited everything from Orochimaru, including Orochimaru's research materials, as well as his body and will. In any case, as long as it was something Orochimaru had, Kabuto inherited it all. Orochimaru's goal was to evolve into a legendary creature, a dragon. The dragon was a supreme existence through and through. This kind of creature that only existed in myths and legends could summon the wind and rain. Just like Dustless, they could soar through the void at will and shatter the earth with a snap of their fingers. Furthermore, the dragon had broken free from the restrictions of the 6 realms of reincarnation and was immortal. His strength was at least on the same level as the 10-tailed beast or even higher. Your ambition is not small. A mere beast with scales and horns wants to transcend. You overestimate yourself. There are many paths to godhood, but there is no place for you, Kabuto Orochi. The corner of his eyes fell on Kabuto, and Dustless's eyes flashed with ridicule. He secretly shook his head. A soft-bodied creature that danced with rats also wanted to shake the earth. It was very funny. Although Kabuto Orochi had the mentality of a dragon, for example, he had many horns on his head when he entered Sage Mode, but it couldn't be said that he had evolved into a dragon. In Dustless's eyes, the Sage Mode Kabuto Orochi was just a slightly stronger bug. Even if one day Kabuto Orochi evolved into a dragon, it would still look like a god. The real dragon originated from the inheritance in the depths of the blood and soul. That was the nobility of life, and not the evolution of a beast like the white phosphorus Orochi. His heart was pitiable, and his ambition should be punished. As a mortal, he had the heart to become a god. This lofty aspiration was indeed worthy of praise, but such an arrogant idea was tantamount to indirectly touching Dustless's bottom line. After losing his value, Kabuto Orochi would be Dustless's first target to clean up. There is also Black Zetsu. Thinking of Black Zetsu, Dustless's ridicule became more obvious. That old fellow planned everything, but he met a more powerful transcended person than him. Looking at the crowd, Dustless was the only one who knew Black Zetsu's plan. When I devour Kagaya, I also want to see your face when you grit your teeth. Laughing, Dustless's footsteps became lighter and more powerful. It would be good if he could find Nibi's Jinchuriki, but if he couldn't, he could only create it himself. As for what method he used, it was not for others to know. It's really strange, what are they so happy about? White Zetsu's eyes were blank. He wasn't very good at scheming, but he could see that whether it was Dustless or Kabuto, they were very happy. Even Black Zetsu's other half gave him a feeling of joy. Do we really have to kill them both? After all, they were partners in the past. Looking at Haydn and Kavu, White Zetsu was quite complicated. Humans are not plants, they can't be emotionless. Except for Black Zetsu, no one here could completely wipe out their inner feelings. It was the same for Kabuto and Dustless. It was precisely because humans had complex emotions that they were humans. If one day they completely lost their emotions, they would just live like a walking corpse. For example, Black Zetsu now, although he also had his own emotions, in the end, it was just Kagaya's will. Since you can't do it, leave this kind of thing to me. I'm very interested in the zombie duo, in the Akatsuki. Kabuto licked his lips and laughed eerily. He was passionate about human experiments, and those bodies that couldn't be broken no matter how much he played with them were naturally more interested. Kabuto! Dustless turned his head and glanced at him. His eyes were calm as he stared at Kazu and Haydn, who were fighting with Konoha's Team 10, including Kazu. Kill them all. Hearing this, Kabuto frowned, and his face flashed with displeasure. Dustless and he had a cooperative relationship, but his tone was commanding. However, for my precious experiment material, I will reluctantly listen to you this time. Chapter 297. Kabuto's goal wasn't immortality. The reason why he pursued immortality was because he needed enough time to explore the truth of the world. Although I'm very unhappy about your life, I'll reluctantly agree to your conditions for the sake of these experimental subjects. However, their corpses are mine. Kabuto's eyes glowed with a green luster as he said with extreme thirst, the bodies of these people are not bad, they are mine. In your dreams, they are members of the organization, they are ghosts of the organization. Black Zetsu stared at Kabuto with dissatisfaction as he refuted mercilessly. With Dustless here, Kabuto wouldn't be able to kill anyone. At the same time he was cursing Kabuto's greed. The number of Edo Tensei in his hands was definitely not less than 3 digits. It doesn't matter, if you have the ability, go ahead and take it. Wu Chun said expressionlessly as he looked at Kabuto indifferently. He closed his eyes and stood there motionlessly. He didn't look like he was going to make a move. He signaled Kabuto to take it himself if he had the ability. Dustless-sama. It doesn't matter, Zetsu. Waving his hand, Dustless raised his eyelids and looked at the void in front of him, then he said casually, since we have become allies, I also hope that you will use their bodies to deal with the enemy. Since he has already joined forces with Kabuto, as long as the Edo Tensei army is used on the enemy, it doesn't matter who has it. Of course, this is not a problem. Kabuto breathed a sigh of relief, and the rock in his heart disappeared. If Dustless didn't back down, he could only admit defeat. After all, Dustless's strength was obvious to all, and the cooperation between the two sides was based on strength. In other words, whoever has the bigger fist has the final say. Since that's the case, it would be impolite for me to accept them. Afraid that Dustless would go back on his words, Kabuto roared out like a cannonball, heading straight toward Haydn and Kazu, as well as the people of Konoha's ninja village. You don't know what's good for you, but it's good to see you make a fool of yourself. Do you think Kazu, Haydn, and Konoha's ninjas are worthless? How foolish. Seeing Orochi Baguette burst out and turned into a divine rainbow roaring out, Wu Chen's indifferent face raised a wicked smile, making Black Zetsu and White Zetsu uncomfortable with goosebumps. They all sighed inwardly that this snake immortal was going to be unlucky. Kakazu and Haydn were S-class ninjas, and Kakashi wasn't weak either. His monocular Mangekyo wasn't something to be trifled with. There was no doubt about the strength of Kazu and Haydn, especially the group of ninjas from Konoha. The fact that they were able to fight the zombie duo indirectly showed that they were extraordinary and powerful. In particular, there were a lot of Konoha's ninjas coming to support them. Even if Kabuto's strength was unprecedented, he would have to lose 2 of his canine teeth if he wanted to take down this group of people. This is a good show, White Zetsu said with a smile. To be able to see Kabuto make a fool of himself, there was nothing more exciting than watching Kabuto get beaten up. Wu Chen also looked at this scene in ridicule, and a gloating expression emerged on his face. He looked quite different from his usual self, just like a little kid who loved to play pranks. Well, where did these stinky snakes come from? The two groups of people who were fighting stopped one after another. They looked at the huge snake swarm that was flying over from the ground in confusion. Both of them showed a cautious expression without prior agreement. Kakuzu, it's not Orochimaru, is it? Fei Duan frowned and spoke in a rather displeased tone. There was a hint of disgust in his voice as he looked at the group of snakes in the distance. Countless small snakes gathered together and pressed over like a huge wave. The number was simply impossible to estimate. I don't know the specific situation, but I'm afraid no one other than Orochimaru can easily use this kind of jutsu. Kakuzu frowned, and his eyes were cautious. Orochimaru was the kind of person who was cautious. If it was really him, then he must have other tricks up his sleeve. Kakashi, sensei, this seems to be the same as during the Chunin exam. Nara Shikamaru's thoughts were immersed in his memories. Thinking of Orochimaru's sudden attack on Konoha during the Chunin exam, he couldn't help but be cautious. Yes, it's most likely Orochimaru. This is bad. Kakashi's Scarlet Manjikyu Sharingan stared at the sea of snakes in front of him. Kakashi's heart clenched, and he felt extremely depressed. He subconsciously looked at Kazu and Haiden, who were talking about Orochimaru. Orochimaru once had a close relationship with these two. Let's clean up this group of snakes first. After narrowing his eyes and pondering for a while, Kakuzu was the first to speak. No one can tolerate countless white snakes swimming around them while they are fighting. For the time being, let's clean up the white snakes, but be careful of the Akatsuki duo. Kakuzu also said firmly. They were surrounded by dense snakes, and even if they wanted to take the opportunity to escape, they had to clean up the snakes first. Naturally, the two opposing sides began to clean up this group of giant snakes at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. All kinds of ninjutsu began to roar, intertwining with bright colors. After all, they were all animals. Even if there were more of them, they were still the targets of torture. For a time, the scene was bloody, and the ground was full of snake heads. This is not over yet. It's just the dessert before the meal. Next is the main course. Kazu frowned, looking at the snake heads on the ground, and said indifferently, "This group of good experimental materials, he won't let them go in vain." Most importantly, there was still Dustless, this spectator-like ally, watching from behind. If his technique was so easily broken, it was inevitable that their strategic alliance would decline. And Kakuzu also felt that Dustless will look down on him. Let's add some more seasoning. Chapter 298. Dustless stared at Kabuto's back with a smile. This kid in Sage Mode was really strong, but it would be troublesome to deal with this group of people. At least, Dustless thought so. Sure enough, it's Orochimaru. Kabuto? Kakashi stared at the figure in the crimson robe with surprise. He thought it was Orochimaru, but when he looked closely, he saw that the thin figure was wearing glasses. Orochimaru didn't wear glasses. Yo, Kakashi, I didn't expect to meet in this way. The world is unpredictable. Seeing that Kakashi had instantly recognized him, Kabuto put on his signature smile and tried to maintain a gentle expression. However, with the scales all over his body, he looked extremely sinister and terrifying. The current Kabuto was more thorough than Orochimaru. He was just a snake in human skin. What's going on with his form? It's exactly the same as Orochimaru, even more thorough. Kakashi raised his eyebrows, his eyes were full of vigilance, and he assumed a defensive posture. No matter what the origin of Kabuto was, in short, he wasn't a good person, especially his new form. It gave Kakashi an unprecedented pressure. This inexplicable pressure was even greater than Orochimaru's. I was wondering who it was. It turned out to be the trader's subordinate, but his strength seems to have increased a lot. Fei Duan said with a condescending attitude while carrying the three-part scythe. His face was full of contempt. Kakuzu's green eyes emitted a cold luster, but his face was heavy. He said in a deep voice, "Don't be careless. This kid seems to be a bit strange. Orochimaru's human experiments can't be underestimated. He may be the kind that succeeded." Orochimaru was indeed a genius, and the most talented kind. Underestimating him would definitely lead to a backlash. Whether it's a dragon or a snake, we'll know once we try. Haydn didn't care. His eyes emitted a crimson light and burst out. A strong gust of wind filled with killing intent blew out. Flying Duan, holding his blood-red scythe, whistled over like a gust of wind. A ripple splashed in the void. It was the crimson scythe sweeping over. So fast! Kabuto's pupils shrank slightly, and he quickly dodged, holding his legs, avoiding the fatal light. At the same time, the snake head behind his robe went straight for Haydn's face. It was worth mentioning that this ferocious snake head was easily broken by Dustless before, but it strangely came back to life. "I knew you would use this trick." With a scornful laugh, Flying Segment remained calm and collected. He calmly turned his body to the side and easily dodged the python's attack. His arms suddenly shook, and the scythe that had missed its target rose up. The cold light easily pierced through the python's head. "Poochie!" The stench of blood filled the air, and a ferocious snake head appeared on the ground. Sure enough, they're not easy to deal with. At the same time, a new snake head with a new head, with a new head, a new snake head, a new head again, a new head again, a new head, a new head again. New head. The contempt in his eyes quickly disappeared, and Kabuto also began to be cautious. He had naturally investigated the information of the members of the Akatsuki, and Haydn was the fastest person in the organization, but his speed was still so fast. So fast that ordinary ninjas didn't even have time to react, they were directly killed. Fast reaction, clean movement, body is exactly the same as Orochimaru. It seems that this kid has indeed undergone some kind of transformation. Seeing the snake head that was cut off grow again, Haydn carefully muttered to himself in a low voice. Abandoning Kabuto's face and not deliberately observing, it was no different from Orochimaru. "Take this opportunity, let's quickly evacuate." Seeing the opportunity, Kakashi decided to retreat. This confrontation obviously didn't have any advantage. As for Asuma's death, he could only helplessly say sorry. There was still a long way to go. There was no need to die now. Although the people of Team 10 were unwilling, they could only endure the humiliation, and at present, they could only temporarily avoid the sharp edge. Whether it was Kabuto, Haydn, or Kakuzu, they couldn't touch them. Looking at each other, they didn't turn around to escape. Still want to escape? This time you will die without a doubt. Don't even think about escaping. With a cold smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless saw that Kakashi and others had already escaped. He sneered again and again. He had let them go time and time again. This time he must completely annihilate them in one fell swoop. His tall and straight figure flashed with a golden luster, and Wu Chen's body began to gradually dissipate into the void. He turned into a golden ray of light and flew straight in the direction of Kakashi and the others. In the dense jungle, several black shadows frantically rushed forward. The speed was so fast that it was impossible to capture with the naked eye. The distance has been pulled far enough, but it's time to rest. Turning his head and seeing that there was no one following behind him, Kakashi was relieved. His body landed on a branch, sweating and gasping for breath. Kakashi's nerves were tense, his eyes spread out, quietly taking in the changes in the expressions of the three people of Team 10. He saw that their pupils were lax, their expressions were like zombies, as if their souls were extracted. They were living in a daze. Even the most resourceful Nara Shikamaru was full of despair and pain. Sooner or later a blood debt will be paid with blood. There is no need to care about a momentary success or failure. Heavily exhaling a turbid breath, he also knew the pain of not being able to kill the enemy, but the reality was so cruel. One day in the future, I will personally tear them into pieces. Nara Shikamaru, who struggled out of despair, said hatefully, completely different from his usual gentle and wise appearance. "I'm really sorry. Kakuzu and Haydn will indeed die, but they will not be killed by you people. because you will fall soon, and it will start with you, young man." The mysterious man wearing a black trench coat fell from the sky. The golden sword in his hand swept straight towards Shikamaru. Chapter 299. There was a cool breeze coming from the jungle. The bell tied to the mysterious man's cloak was gently blown, and there was a clear and melodious sound of nature. The beautiful rhythm jumped out of the notes of death, and what followed was the most primitive barbaric killing of human beings. Dustless's eyes were cold, and his face was expressionless. The Kusanagi sword in his hand was surging with a monstrous momentum, revealing a sharp edge that could cut through everything. He mercilessly went straight to Shikamaru Nara's head. "Am I dead?" Shikamaru Nara's heart was calm when he sensed the sharp edge that was about to crush him. He calmly closed his eyes and quietly waited for death. The shadow of his former teacher Asuma suddenly appeared in his mind. Maybe death is the final atonement, the best relief. The corner of his mouth revealed a relieved smile. After Asuma, who was both his teacher and friend, died, he often had nightmares. As long as life and death disappeared, all these nightmares would end, and he would also be free and no longer suffer the pain of death. This is not like you, Shikamaru. Death can't solve everything. You still need to avenge Asuma. A tired and haggard voice sounded, pulling Shikamaru's thoughts back. He opened his eyes, and the light sword that was about to cut off his head was above his head. Looking up, the void suddenly distorted, and the majestic devouring force made Dustless's light sword unable to move. It was as if it was bound and unable to move. "Has it been transferred?" Curling his lips, Dustless looked at the majestic devouring force in the sky. The space had been distorted by the powerful force, and Dustless's hand was naturally unable to move. Shadow binding technique. A dark shadow suddenly rushed out from the bottom of his feet, quickly extended forward, and connected with Dustless. Seeing this, Shikamaru Nara's previous decadence disappeared, and the corner of his mouth gently raised. With a confident smile, he said, "Now, I will let you experience the Nara clans." "Stupid, how can this kind of trick work on me?" Looking at Shikamaru Nara with a sneer, Dustless rudely interrupted his speech. At the same time, the power in his body reversed and reversed the chakra cycle in his body. The black shadow that was restraining Dustless was directly absorbed. "I've heard that your mind is very good, but your way of thinking is unexpectedly slow and naive. If everything can be solved with cleverness and cunning, would your teacher Asuma still be killed? Would you still be helpless and just stare at the enemy helplessly? I'm sorry to tell you, but that's impossible." Dustless looked at Shikamaru Nara with disdain and said with killing intent, "If everything could be solved by the brain, the world would have been peaceful long ago, and there would be no such thing as ninja, a product of war." Golden light gathered at the tip of his finger. The sharp radiance was enough to pierce through everything. Dustless's cold eyes scrutinized the few of them. A strong chakra fluctuation erupted from his body as he broke free from the whirlpool in the sky. "Return to the embrace of heaven. You pretentious brat." Laser. The divine radiance tumbled and jumped out from Dustless's fingertip. The whistling golden beam cut through the thorns and shuttled through Shikamaru Nara's body. Looking at it, his body had been penetrated by Dustless, and the target was his heart. His internal organs were empty, and the internal organs in his body were burned in an instant. The golden light gathered and did not dissipate. It was like a materialized light sword that penetrated Shikamaru Nara's entire body and was inserted into his body forever. After receiving such a heavy blow, even a god would not be able to survive. Shikamaru Nara closed his eyes heavily, and his exhausted face showed a light expression. In the dark, Dustless seemed to see Shikamaru Nara's smile. Dustless. Seeing that Shikamaru Nara had completely fallen to the ground and lost his breath, Kakashi's eyes were about to burst, and he said in pain, "What made you become like this? You were not like this before." Looking at Kakashi faintly, looking at his painful appearance, Dustless said indifferently, "Kakashi, I dragged him from hell to heaven, and let him into the embrace of God. Why are you so sad? Go to hell." Seeing that their best friend was killed by Dustless in the blink of an eye, the other two teammates were devastated, and they stared at Dustless with scarlet eyes. The murderous aura surged out of their body like a tide, and they rushed toward Dustless. "Bastard, go back, you are not his opponent." Seeing this, Kakashi quickly shouted, trying to stop the two from courting death. In front of Dustless, even a Kage-level powerhouse could be killed in seconds if they were not careful, let alone these little brats who were only Chunin level. "Since you want to die so much, I will fulfill your wish." With a bloodthirsty sneer on the corner of his mouth, Dustless transformed into a ferocious carnivorous beast, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the two members of Team 10, and without the slightest mercy, the Kusanagi sword slashed down. Pucci, a strange blood-red light splashed in the void, narrow and deadly, and looking at the abdomen of the two, a dazzling sword mark appeared, which went deep into the bone marrow. Obviously, Dustless had completely beheaded the two, killing them in one blow. Their heartbeat and breathing stopped at the same time, and they closed their eyes in despair. Including the beautiful blonde girl, who had a beautiful figure, was killed by Dustless in seconds. This way, you shouldn't feel the pressure and pain. Have a good trip. Looking at the quiet faces of the two who died, Dustless said indifferently, as if he had just done a trivial thing. He gently raised his finger, and a black ghost fire appeared in his palm, and fell on the bodies of the three, and slowly burned them. With the passage of time, the bodies of the three were swallowed by the wind, and disappeared forever between heaven and earth. Chapter 300. Kakashi's eyes were dull and abnormally sluggish, staring at the three flames slowly burning on the ground. His whole body seemed to have been pulled out of his spine. There was no breath of life. His heart and liver were broken, and his whole body was weak. Killing people is just a matter of nodding the head, but now Dustless erased the bodies of the three people forever. It can no longer be described as cruel and cold. Such words to describe Dustless are too flattering. "Damn you, Uchiha Dustless." Kakashi glared at him. His eyes were scarlet, and an unprecedented murderous aura broke out of his body. In the face of this situation, even a wise ninja like him was enraged. In an instant, Kakashi turned into a bloodthirsty beast, looking at Dustless with a murderous aura. "Ah, you are so cruel, Kakashi. They are just a few harmless pawns. You and I are both people who came out of the war, and you sympathize with them. If I were you, I would think about my own situation." Turning a deaf ear to Kakashi's surging murderous aura, Wuchen smiled and said as if nothing had happened, He was exceptionally calm and light. Seeing Dustless like this, without the slightest remorse, Kakashi's pupils became colder. "You have completely lost your conscience and fallen into the evil path." Labeling Dustless as a must-kill, Kakashi said indifferently, "Some people can turn back and be saved even if they fall into the evil path, but some people are the opposite. Dustless, a deep-rooted person who has fallen into the evil path, has no possibility of reining in the horse at the edge of the cliff. Oh, you people always like to put yourself on the moral high ground and casually criticize others." Clicking his tongue, Dustless also looked at Kakashi with a hopeless look, and said contemptuously, "Evil path? I feel like the god of creation, giving them a new life." Looking at Kakashi's eyes, Dustless said, "Since your Konoha ninja village is so good at bewitching people, then I might as well help you this time." With a smile on his face, Dustless raised his eyelids and looked at Kakashi with pity, and said faintly, "The essence of this world is the law of the jungle, and the weak are destined to be preyed on by the strong above the food chain. And the ninja industry is even more the principle of the law of the jungle. It is the most common thing to take people's money to eliminate disasters for them. He's just an ant. Don't worry about it, Kakashi." Thinking of the few people who died before, Dustless has a clear conscience. However, Kakashi's words immediately caused a fierce rebound. His eyes were like knives as he stared at Dustless. When he was about to step forward and fight with Dustless's sudden words made Kakashi's movements all stagnate. The leaking murderous aura also disappeared. I remember that when they died just now, they all had a relieved expression. The blood in his eyes swept away, and Kakashi recalled the relief on their faces before, and he couldn't help but fall into a trance, and fell into contemplation. Kakashi is not a fool. He is good at understanding other people's emotions, and then finding the enemy's flaws from it. He saw the changes in the expressions of Shikamaru and the other two. As Dustless said, Shikamaru and the other two did have hatred toward Dustless, but it was mixed with relief. Kakashi didn't understand what it meant. Don't you understand, Kakashi? Seeing Kakashi's confused look, Dustless whispered, Your father, Hataki Tsukumo, known as Konoha's White Fang, has you forgotten his death? It's tragic enough. Hataki Tsukumo is a tragic hero. He cherishes his companions, thinks of others everywhere, and is even willing to sacrifice his life for his companions. He is respected by the world, including Dustless. However, such a well-known hero failed the mission because of saving his companions. He was criticized, and the way he died was extremely aggrieved and helpless. He was forced to commit suicide, which is the biggest irony. Is Konoha's White Fang wrong? No, obviously not. Human beings stole chakra and obtained godlike abilities. But as the saying goes, there is cause and effect. Because of stealing the chakra that God should have, human beings themselves are trapped in the infinite cycle created by chakra, and they hate each other and kill each other. Dustless said, his voice was particularly vicissitudes of life, and sarcastically said, ninjas are originally deformed products. When the energy of chakra is extracted, it means the beginning of the curse. Your father didn't do anything wrong. It's not him who is wrong. It's the world that has been eroded and cursed by chakra. Kakashi remained silent and listened quietly. He tried his best to maintain his calmness. He knew that Wu Chen was trying to mislead the crowd with his lies at this moment. However, Dustless still saw Kakashi's mouth twitching slightly, and his eyes flashed with fleeting hatred from time to time. Obviously, he also felt injustice for his father's death. Remembering that he was still a ninja of Konoha, he gritted his teeth and persisted. It's useless to continue to hide your inner emotions, Kakashi. Seeing Kakashi suppressing the hatred in his heart, Dustless just smiled indifferently and said, In fact, you should also be aware that if one day the power of chakra no longer exists, the world will be completely stable and there will no longer be such a thing as a shinobi world war. Dustless's calm eyes suddenly flashed with a red light, and the corners of his mouth suddenly raised into an evil smile, and his ambition was ignited. Staring at Kakashi's face, his cold and arrogant voice didn't disappear for a long time. I, Uchiha Dustless, will extract the chakra of the world, integrate it into my body, let myself inherit all evil, and cut off the cycle of karma. I will free the world from the curse of chakra. What is the crime? Not only am I not guilty, but I am the founder of the happiness of the world, the strongest savior who destroyed the old world and established a new system. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.